This video continues with Chapter 21 Unexpected Lineup. Marvel, loading the strongest anime templates. Chapter 21 Unexpected Lineup. What is that? On the way back to the fighter plane, when passing by a room filled with various advanced machines, Hawking's heart moved and he pointed to the pool in the middle pretending to be curious. Wolverine explained with a complex expression. That's where I was first experimented on, and the silver liquid bubbling next to it was adamantium alloy. According to Stryker, the original liquid can only be maintained at high temperatures and will be indestructible once cooled. After saying that, he glared hard at Stryker, who was being held by Colossus. Stryker covered his right hand that was pierced by Wolverine and said sarcastically, "You should be grateful to me. Without me, you would still be using those broken bones as weapons. Then let me use them to thank you properly." Upon hearing this, Wolverine instantly popped out his adamantium alloy wolf claws with both hands, and was about to hit Stryker a few more times. However, he was stopped by Professor X. "Logan, don't kill him first, but keep him to prove the assassination and make the president give up his decision to go to war against mutants. Stryker controls Nightcrawler to assassinate the president in an attempt to provoke a war between humans and mutants. In a few days, the president will disclose the threat of mutants on the news and issue an order for war with mutants. He needs to come up with evidence that Stryker started all this in order to solve this crisis." While Wolverine was talking to Professor X, Hawking had already quickly ran to the pool. He looked around and found a suitable hollow tube nearby, picked up the adamantium alloy syringe and poured it into it. After the original liquid cooled down, he squeezed it hard, and the tube shattered, and a thick and hard adamantium alloy long stick appeared in his hand. When the Wukong template is loaded, he has the Rui stick, but in normal state he has no weapons. Although all Saiyans like to fight with bare hands, when he is not strong enough, he feels that he is stronger with weapons than without weapons. In the future world, Big Trantus also carries a sword when he fights androids. Adamantium alloy is one of the hardest metals in the Marvel world. In addition to being able to maintain a liquid state at high temperatures when it is first smelted, it becomes indestructible once cooled. Even at a high temperature of 500,000 degrees Celsius, there is still no sign of melting. It's rare to encounter it now, so how can we waste it and stay here? In fact, if there wasn't a mold nearby, he would have wanted a knife or a sword, which would be more lethal. It's a pity that we can't stay here for a long time, and we can't dismantle the whole machine and take it away. Once the machine stops and the liquid cools down, it can no longer be melted and can only be used to make sticks. Get out quickly, there's trouble. King Huo was making an adamantium alloy rod here, but Professor X's expression changed over there. "Professor, what's going on?" Storm asked quickly. She had rarely seen Professor X with such a solemn expression, even when facing Magneto directly. Eric was fighting with people outside the base and was about to lose it. What? Everyone was shocked when they heard this. They were well aware of Magneto's power. If they were serious, they might not be Magneto's opponent together. Who can beat Magneto but can't hold on? At this time, Hawking, who came back with the adamantium alloy rod, was also stunned because this situation was completely beyond his expectation. At least in the plots he knew, this didn't happen. What the S.H.I.E.L.D? On the snow outside the base, Hawking's eyes suddenly widened as he looked at the group of people fighting Magneto. The one holding the shield is the same as the one in the comics. He is obviously Captain Britain's Carter, and the one holding the bow and arrow is probably Hawkeye Barton. The one with red hair who looks 16 or 17 years old, but who is agile and can fight on par with Mystique. Maybe the Black Widow who just blew up the Red House and joined S.H.I.E.L.D. The bald black man with an eye patch standing behind them and the white man with M-shaped hair loss next to them are most likely Nick Fury and Phil Coulson. As for the black woman whose whole body was wrapped in energy, who was holding Lao Wanda in the air above her head, needless to say, It must be Maria Rambeau, the friend of Captain Marvel in the main universe and the founder of Skyward Sword Bureau, who has now become Captain Marvel in this universe. If these people were picked out individually, he really wouldn't be able to recognize them because of their age, but if they were put together, it would be obvious. Why is S.H.I.E.L.D here? As soon as the idea came to mind, Hawking couldn't help but slap himself on the head and secretly scolded himself for negligence. Although what he is experiencing now is very similar to the plot of his independent mutant movie, this is not an independent mutant universe, but the 838 universe. In addition to mutants, most of Marvel's characters and organizations exist. So how could S.H.I.E.L.D. not intervene in such a big matter when the president was attacked by mutants? The newly established S.H.I.E.L.D. might not be able to get involved, but it is already 2000. By this time, Nick Fury should have been the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., leading S.H.I.E.L.D. to truly develop. According to Nick Fury's arrogant character who wants to control all dangers in his own hands, how could he easily let mutants cause trouble? You must know that when there are no mutants in the main universe, anyone with superpowers in the world will be found and monitored by S.H.I.E.L.D., and there will be a special list. What surprised him was that Captain Marvel in this world still stayed on Earth and did not leave for the universe. Because Carol, Captain Marvel of the main world, after defeating the invading Kree in 1995, went to the universe to maintain peace in the universe, leaving only a BB machine for Nick Fury. I think the universe is different, the characters are different, the personalities are different, and many things develop differently. Just like Captain Carter of England, logically he shouldn't appear now. In order to prevent a plane carrying a nuclear bomb from blowing up New York, Captain America in the main universe crashed into a glacier with the plane. He was not discovered and unsealed until 2011 by S.H.I.E.L.D. And Captain Carter of this universe, according to the comics he read, was sealed to a different space in order to prevent the Red Skull from using the cosmic cube to release Hydra. Boom. Captain Marvel punched through the combat helicopter in front of him and knocked Magneto out of the air. Hawkeye saw the right moment and shot a special non-metallic anesthesia arrow, which numbed Magneto and fainted. At the same time, during the battle with Black Widow, Mystique was hit in the back of the head with a shield by Captain Carter and fainted. You must be Professor Charles. I am Nick Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D. I am ordering you and your students to come with me and accept the investigation on the attack on the president. Don't try to resist. You should have seen the fate of these two. After successfully capturing Magneto and Mystique, Nick Fury also saw Professor X coming out of the spillway, as well as the teleporting mutant who had attacked the president. Chapter 22: X-Men vs. S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D. Hearing this name, Professor X also had a puzzled look on his face. He was quite familiar with the CIA. After all, he had deep contact with them during the First War, when he even fell in love with a female CIA agent. As for S.H.I.E.L.D., he really hadn't heard of it. He tried to activate his ability to read the other party's memory, but found that his mind-reading ability did not work. We used to be called the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Agency. By the way, Professor Charles, don't try to control me with your abilities. Since I dare to come here to arrest you, I must be prepared. Nick Fury reached out and tapped his neck, where a circular device with blue light was attached. The brainwave interference device is modified from the device used by the Kree Supreme Intelligence to control Captain Marvel's thoughts. It can perform a certain degree of mental intrusion and protection. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 was actually an incident caused by the mutant Black Emperor. He obtained all the intelligence stored in the CIA after taking office as director. In view of the terrifying abilities of Magneto and Professor X, he has never dared to take action. But this time the mutants attacked the president, which had already touched his bottom line. In addition, the device that resisted Professor X's mind control had just been modified, so he took action decisively. I think there is a misunderstanding between us. Professor X did not want to conflict with government agencies, so he patiently explained what happened. Unfortunately, Nick Fury is not the type to be easily persuaded. Needless to say, after taking you back, I will find out the real answer. If the assassination of the president has nothing to do with you, and if you are willing to sign an agreement at that time, then I can consider letting you go back. Who is the mastermind behind the attack on the president is not very important to him. Even if it is true as Professor X said, he cannot let him go so easily. For humans, mutants are always time bombs. Although he has no intention of exterminating mutants, the development of mutants must be under his supervision. So as long as the two leaders of the mutant forces, Magneto and Professor X, are controlled, the rest will not be a concern. I'm sorry, but I cannot leave the safety of my students in the hands of a government agency that doesn't understand it. After hearing Nick Fury's strong reply, Professor X shook his head. No matter how naive he is, he will never be so naive as to believe that government agencies will treat them mutants equally and will really arrest them and confirm the facts before releasing them. He had made this mistake once before, and the result was that all the students were forced into a cruel battlefield, and either died in battle or were turned into experimental materials by some careerists. For this reason, he was depressed for a long time before he figured it out and got back on his feet. So after the school opened again, he began to train X-Men who could fight to protect his students from destruction. He believes that the entire human race will eventually go on the right path and create a better future with mutants, but this trust does not include certain government agencies. Then there is no other way. I can only deal with you like I dealt with Mr. Eric. As Nick Fury's voice fell, Captain Marvel, Captain Carter, Black Widow, Hawkeye, and 3 heavily armed S.H.I.E.L.D. agent teams launched an attack here. Previously, because they were worried about being affected by Magneto's ability, the 3 S.H.I.E.L.D. agent teams had been hiding in the distance, led by Agent May. At this time, Magneto has been taken down, and they all carry devices that can block mind control, so they can naturally cooperate in the attack. X-Men, fight! Upon seeing this, Professor X had no choice but to issue a battle order. Storm's eyes turned white when she activated her power, and the sky suddenly became covered with dark clouds. Under her control, lightning struck at the gun-wielding S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. Wolverine and Death Girl, who regained their consciousness, ejected their adamantium wolf claws and rushed towards Captain Carter, Black Widow, and May. Cyclops opened his eyes with red shockwaves and struck Captain Marvel, who was wrapped in energy in the air. Colossus turned into steel and stood in front of Cyclops and Storm, helping them block the stray bullets fired at them. Nightcrawler, a Christian who has little combat experience, is responsible for protecting the weak Professor X and guarding him to prevent Stryker from escaping in the Chaos Call-Out. At this time, a sharp arrow, at a very special and sinister angle, escaped Colossus' defense and shot towards Storm, who was controlling the field to release lightning. It was Hawkeye Barton who was hiding in a hidden corner. Seeing that Storm was so powerful in controlling the field that a large number of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents were stunned, he launched a sneak attack on her. Hold it for me. Throwing the adamantium alloy long stick in his hand to the Knight Raider, Hawking also pulled out the wishful stick and took action. He understands that in fact, everyone else in S.H.I.E.L.D. has no big problem, and the main opponent is Captain Marvel. The Captain Marvel of the 838 universe is not Carol, who has a strong character and strong heart, but his best friend Maria Rambeau. Her strength may be slightly inferior, but she is definitely abnormal. Even Lao Wan was defeated by her in the end, so he has to remove the obstacles as quickly as possible and let everyone work together to help Cyclops deal with Captain Marvel. He jumped up, and with the wishful stick in his hand, he accurately knocked away the arrows shot by Hawkeye, and then the figure flashed and rushed towards the hiding place of Hawkeye. Hawkeye is not very powerful, but his arrows are very tricky, especially in group fights, and he is very restrained against types like Storm and Cyclops. Whoosh! 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 Seeing Hawking, who was just a child, rushing towards him quickly, Hawkeye did not dare to be careless, and shot at Hawking as fast as an arrow, and the arrows of each arrow had special abilities, such as electric shock, paralysis, mucus, etc. After image punch. However, Hawking didn't want to get entangled, and directly used the afterimage fist to leave a series of afterimages, and rushed to Hawkeye as quickly as possible. Fall down, you. In the face of absolute speed and strength, Hawking was knocked unconscious to the ground with a stick by Hawking without even being able to block a single move from the approaching Hawkeye. But when he wanted to help and deal with the others first, the Cyclops over there could no longer stop him. Captain Marvel, who was in the air, was able to withstand the red shock wave emitted by Cyclops with all his strength, and was almost in front of him. If Captain Marvel were to get close to him, Cyclops would probably be killed in one move. Storm also noticed this, and quickly concentrated all the lightning, and attacked Captain Marvel with Cyclops, which slowed her down. However, it only slowed down. Captain Marvel was still approaching them. Turtle-style Kigong. Upon seeing this, Hawking quickly moved to the side of the confrontation between the two sides, and a Kigong wave with full output hit Captain Marvel's face. Because Captain Marvel's power was concentrated on fighting Cyclops and Storm, he was accidentally pushed out. Chapter 23: The Terrifying Saiyan Giant Ape. You can't even break through the defense. Seeing Captain Marvel being knocked away by his full turtle Kigong, he just shook his head and rushed forward again. Hawking also frowned. Also, the main universe surprise can directly physically blast the Kree space battleship, and even if the 838 universe surprise pulls it off a little, it is not something that the Turtle School Kigong of his level can defeat. Neither does adding Storm and Cyclops. Others who also saw this scene had horror in their eyes, and Nick Fury persuaded him again, "You have no chance of winning. There is no need to engage in unnecessary confrontation. If it really has nothing to do with you, I will not hurt you afterwards." However, how could Hawking bet his fate on the character of Nick Fury in this universe? Even if Professor X compromised, he would not compromise. So in line with the principle of catching the thief first, he flashed his figure and rushed directly towards Nick Fury as fast as possible. As long as Nick Fury is captured and used as a hostage, there is a high probability that Captain Marvel can be forced to stop and then successfully withdraw to New York. When Nick Fury returns to New York, it will be difficult to arrest them. On the one hand, he must consider whether he can afford the destructive consequences of such a level of battle in New York. On the other hand, we must also consider how many humans will suffer once Professor X goes rampant in the city. In addition, as long as the evidence of Stryker's provocation is handed over to the president in time, Nick Fury will have no legitimate reason to attack Professor X. What's more, Professor, it's just that imagination is beautiful, but reality is not easy. Seeing Hawking rushing towards Nick Fury, Captain Marvel gave up arresting Professor X and turned around to stop Hawking. Hawking is fast, but Captain Marvel can not only fly, but also be faster. Kid, stop, I promise you, as long as you obey, Fury will not hurt you. Seeing that Hawking was a child, Captain Marvel just stopped him and did not attack immediately. But I don't think so. Maybe you don't know him that well. Hawking narrowed his eyes and performed the Kame Senryu hand gesture. Energy attacks are useless, so he can only fight hand to hand, which is what he is good at. I don't understand him. He is my husband, how could I not understand him? However, Captain Marvel's next words made Hawking, who was about to take action, panic. What? Captain Marvel and Nick Fury are married. But after thinking about it, it doesn't seem to be too inconsistent. After all, both of them are black and their race and skin color match well. Moreover, in the main world, Maria Rambeau also got married very early and had a daughter. It is obvious that she is not as interested in marriage and love as Carol. After the two experienced the Kree incident together, it was only natural that they fell in love and eventually got married. This also explains why at this point in time, Captain Marvel is not helping other planets enslaved by the Kree in the universe, but has been staying on Earth to help Nick Fury. Triple after image fist. After reacting, Hawking launched another attack. Regardless of whether Captain Marvel and Nick Fury are a couple, they are enemies that need to be defeated for him now. Leaving behind 3 phantoms to confuse, Hawking's body had flashed over Captain Marvel, and his hand slashed down towards her neck. His target is the brainwave jamming device on Captain Marvel's neck. Even if Captain Marvel can't be defeated this time and the brainwave jamming device can be destroyed, then Professor X's mind control can work. He doesn't believe that Captain Marvel can be completely immune to Professor X's mind control. However, Captain Marvel's strength still exceeded his expectations. He actually dodged his attack and raised his hand to grab the clothes behind his back and pick him up. You are indeed very fast, but you can't hide it from me yet. Since you are disobedient, I can only knock you out first. Watching Captain Carter and Black Widow locked in a tough fight over there, most of the ordinary S.H.I.E.L.D. agents led by May were also eliminated. Captain Marvel stopped delaying and raised his hand to knock Hawking unconscious with a palm. It seems like this is the only way. Faced with such a desperate situation, Hawking no longer held back. He manipulated his tail to knock off the Mickey Mouse sunglasses on his face, and stared directly at the round full moon in the sky. Dong dong. Dong 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 dong. For a moment his heart seemed to be stimulated by something, and it began to jump at a high speed, and his body also expanded rapidly, bursting through the martial arts uniform, and breaking free from Captain Marvel's restraints. This kid, what's going on? Seeing his body getting bigger and bigger, with more and more hair, and finally transformed into the giant ape Hawking, who was 14 to 15 meters tall, Captain Marvel was so frightened that he immediately retreated and flew away for a distance. Roar! Hawking's eyes were red and he shouted at the moon. An uncontrollable anger and desire for destruction filled his brain, telling him constantly, destroy, destroy, destroy everything. If it were just a simple low-level warrior Sun Wukong, he must have completely lost his mind at this time. But fortunately, in addition to the character of Sun Wukong under the protagonist's template, the person who occupies the dominant consciousness is Hawking himself, so he still retains a trace of sanity. Although he still couldn't suppress the anger and desire for destruction in his mind, he tried his best to focus on Captain Marvel floating in the air. He slammed his hands into the ground twice, and the powerful force immediately shattered the ice-covered earth. He opened his mouth, and a huge energy cannon that was 10 times more powerful than the ordinary turtle-style kick shot out of his mouth and went straight towards Captain Marvel. Boom! Even though Captain Marvel released the energy in his body immediately, he was still rushed away. Roar! With another roar, Hawking jumped hard and caught up with Captain Marvel, who was knocked away. He put his hands together and hit him down with all his strength. After that, there was a blast of hammers on the ground, plus a crazy output of energy waves from the mouth. 13-year-old Wukong climbed the Kalen Tower and defeated Tao Beibai. His combat power should be more than 120, around 140, because Tao Beibai's combat power is 120. After transforming into a giant ape, the combat power is increased tenfold, which means the combat power is around 1,400. This combat power value has already caught up with Raditz. Raditz's combat power is 1,500. Under normal circumstances, he can destroy the civilization of a planet by himself. Think about how Piccolo, who had only 260 combat power at that time, captured the technologically advanced Dragon Ball Earth capital by himself. The full-out energy attack during the decisive battle with Goku almost created a mushroom cloud effect. So at this time, Hawking in the form of a giant ape is really capable of fighting against Captain Marvel of the 838 universe. Chapter 24 Saiyan Giant Ape vs Captain Marvel. Get out of my way. Captain Marvel, who was beaten deep into the ground by Hawking's giant ape form, finally burst out in anger. She burst out all the energy in her body, broke through Hawking's suppression in one fell swoop, and punched Hawking away with the energy pillar. Roar! Under attack, Hawking became even angrier, and even his remaining sanity was covered up by instinct. The energy wave from his mouth exploded towards Captain Marvel without any cost, and his body jumped up again to attack him. The two sides were going back and forth, and the fight was so intense that the whole world was shattered. But overall, Captain Marvel has the upper hand because Captain Marvel can fly and has a small body, so he can easily dodge Hawking's attacks and is not so easy to be hit. After Hawking transformed into a giant ape, his body was too big, so his movements were inevitably slower, and he had many flaws in his attacks. But Hawking's destructive power is very terrifying. In the form of a giant ape, he seems to have no energy restrictions. The energy cannons fired from his mouth are one after another without any effort at all. The key is that he himself is rough and thick-skinned. Although Captain Marvel's attack hurt him very much, it was not fatal. Of course, it is also possible that Captain Marvel knew that he was still a child and could not kill him. After all, he was not as sinister as Nick Fury. The most important point is that Captain Marvel has to take into account the safety of S.H.I.E.L.D. and others over there. Although the place where the two were fighting was now quite a distance away from the snowy field at the beginning, Hawking's energy cannon would still accidentally shoot there from time to time. If she didn't block it, that one shot could directly kill all S.H.I.E.L.D. members except Captain Carter. To be honest, if Hawking hadn't lost all his sanity at this time, catching Nick Fury and the others and firing energy cannons would have made Captain Marvel tired of dealing with it. Oh, hell, Hawking, I'll never call you little monkey again. Looking at the brutal Hawking in the form of a giant ape, Wolverine took Professor X and others and quickly evacuated in the direction where the X-Fighter was parked. Before setting off, he had heard from Storm that Hawking could have a second burst of power. If it reached the point where he could no longer control it, he would have Nightcrawler take him to teleport and cut off Hawking's tail. At the time, he actually didn't take it seriously, thinking that Hawking might be making a fuss out of a molehill. Now he realized that it was not a fuss at all. Hawking in the form of a giant ape casually slapped the ground and the earth cracked. The energy cannon shot from his mouth was even more powerful and terrifying. Ever since Hawking transformed into a giant ape and fought Captain Marvel, they could no longer continue fighting. The ground was shaking and collapsing. The energy cannon that Hawking occasionally fired near them turned into a huge crater, and the aftermath of the light made them unsteady. If the shot hits the dam and the dam breaks, all of them standing here will be swept away. It can only be said that it is fortunate that Stryker's base is very far away from the city and is built on an uninhabited mountain and lake. Otherwise, it would be a catastrophe now. Nick Fury over there was obviously aware of this, and no longer bothered with Professor originally. According to his plan, he could basically capture Magneto and Professor X at no cost. But he didn't expect that among Professor if he continues to destroy like this, even if he wins in the end, he will be in trouble afterwards. The X-Fighter and S.H.I.E.L.D. Quinjet took off almost at the same time, but they did not leave. Instead, they hovered over Captain Marvel and Hawking, observing the battle between the two below. If Captain Marvel wins, with Captain Marvel's speed, if the X-Fighters don't escape now, they won't be able to escape soon. If Hawking wins, S.H.I.E.L.D. arrest operation can only be considered half a success, and the X-Men can evacuate smoothly. But as far as the current situation is concerned, Captain Marvel clearly has the upper hand. Professor, what should we do now? On the X-Fighter, Storm piloted the fighter and looked at Professor X. Hawking is now transformed into a giant ape and has lost his mind, and they don't know how long it can last. Professor, see if we can get through the signal on the other side. I want to talk to the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Professor X thought for a moment and replied to Storm. It would definitely not work to cut off Hawking's tail now, and he wouldn't be able to leave Hawking and run away like this. It would be even less advisable to use auxiliary attacks because the S.H.I.E.L.D. over there would definitely do the same. So he wanted to try to see if he could reach agreement on terms through negotiation. The situation now was different from the situation just now. At least they were evenly matched. Under the control of Storm, the signal was quickly connected to the Quinjet fighter from S.H.I.E.L.D. on the opposite side. Director Fury, if we continue fighting like this, we will both lose. Do you really want mutants and humans to go to war? And if they continue to fight like this, it's hard to guarantee that they won't hit the city. I don't think either of us is willing to see the result. The opponent doesn't know the timeliness of Hawking's ability to explode, nor does he know Hawking's weaknesses. This is their advantage in negotiating. On the other side, Nick Fury replied after a moment of silence, I don't want to start a war with mutants, I just want to find out the truth of the matter. It's because of your lack of cooperation that this happened. At this time, he was also a little bit stuck. As the battle between Hawking and Captain Marvel escalated, several hills in the Rocky Mountains were bombarded to the ground, and there were huge craters everywhere in the forest on the ground. I don't know how bad the consequences would be if the fight continued, but he was unwilling to just give up. In this way, Director Fury, when I return to New York, I will take Colonel Stryker and all the evidence to your S.H.I.E.L.D. for investigation. For now, please let my students go. Professor X gave the steps, and Nick Fury also planned to follow these steps. His purpose is to control the threat of mutants in his own hands and turn it into his own power to deal with powerful alien civilizations outside the Earth in the future. It's not really about fighting to the death with mutants. Although this result is not satisfactory now, it can be said that it is in the past. At least the anti-human Magneto has been caught. Later, we can slowly continue to talk with Professor X, a mutant who is close to humans. However, just when he was about to agree to Professor X's proposal, the battlefield changed. Hawking, who was in the form of a giant ape, suddenly shook his body and then began to shrink rapidly and returned to the appearance of a child. Professor Charles, I think it would be better for you to follow me to S.H.I.E.L.D. for investigation now. The changes on the battlefield have completely shifted the situation to S.H.I.E.L.D's side, and Nick Fury will naturally no longer agree to Professor X's proposal. Chapter 25 The Rational Magic Ape appears. The time for Wukong's template is up, and his combat effectiveness will not be so strong after the transformation. Hawking felt that his body was shrinking rapidly, his sanity was returning again, and he suddenly felt something bad inside. Although he also has Saiyan blood in his body and can transform into a giant ape even without loading the Goku template, his combat power is not much stronger even if it is increased tenfold. What's more, there are also the after effects of ending the template. You might faint before you can change again. Needless to say, the final result is that all the X-Men will be taken away and imprisoned by S.H.I.E.L.D, and the subsequent situation will definitely not be so good. At this time, he also realized that although the protagonist template loaded was powerful, it was an external force after all. Once the external force disappeared, he would become useless again. You can borrow external forces, but in the end you still have to strengthen yourself. In this way, even if one day his magical loading protagonist panel disappears, he will still be powerful. After this time, his focus will still be on the cultivation of his own body. When his physical strength reaches the same level as 13-year-old Wukong, will he truly have some ability to protect himself? At that time, loading the Wukong template only added a wishful stick. After loading, the wishful stick would disappear at best, which would have little impact on his strength. Fortunately, my justice value by killing the Master of Illusion and preventing Professor X from destroying mutants is enough for me to open the next template. Although Wukong's template cannot be used, he can still draw a new template, but what the new template is depends on luck. If you draw an Ultraman, the crisis will be solved immediately. Relying on his strong willpower, he endured the dizziness after loading the protagonist template, and quickly opened the panel to check it out. The Justice Value progress bar is full, and a protagonist template can be drawn. Do you want to draw? Extract. I chose extraction without hesitation. No matter who the next protagonist template is, as long as he loads it immediately after being drawn, there is a chance that the BUG will cancel the backswing caused by the last loading of the protagonist template, so that he will not fall into a coma. The drawing is over. The protagonist template drawn this time is 14-year-old Harry Potter from the Harry Potter world. Do you want to load it? 14-year-old Harry Potter is in 4th grade, that is, when he is in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire load. It's definitely disappointing to say that Harry Potter is a template. Although the various magics are not strong in attack power, their magical effects can provide him with great assistance in his later life. For example, the lock-picking spell can open any lock, the transformation spell can temporarily change the properties of objects, the repair spell can repair items, etc. But these magics can only assist and are not enough to deal with Captain Marvel. With the successful loading of the Harry Potter protagonist template, Hawking, who had returned to normal, changed again. The clothes on his body changed from the X-Men battle uniform to a black wizard robe. His hair was fluffy, he wore glasses on his face, and there was a lightning symbol on his forehead. He has a firebolt broomstick and a large cloak in his left hand, and a holly wand in his right hand. There are also firebolts and invisibility cloaks. He expected that there was a magic wand. After all, the Sun Wukong template also had a wish-fulfilling wand when it was loaded, but the presence of a broomstick and an invisibility cloak was beyond his expectation. But after thinking about it, the speed of the firebolt is about 240 kilometers per hour. Even if he rides on it and escapes now, he can't outrun Captain Marvel, a pervert who can travel in the universe. The invisibility cloak, on the other hand, might allow him to hide if he finds a rare opportunity to put it on. Invisibility cloaks are the 3 major Deathly Hallows in the Harry Potter world, and have permanent invisibility effects. Legend has it that even the god of death cannot find people wearing invisibility cloaks. Presumably it should be easy to see through without being high-tech. However, if he escapes, Professor X and others will not be spared. By then, without Professor Let's transform first, maybe we can bluff him. Putting away his distracting thoughts, Hawking looked up at the big moon in the sky. Dong dong. Dong 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 dong, the familiar racing heartbeat came again. As expected, this bloodline is not covering, but superimposing. He had already guessed that loading the protagonist template did not just turn him into the protagonist, but superimposed it on his own original one. Originally, he was just an ordinary person, so no changes could be seen when superimposing the Wukong template. Now that his body is a Saiyan, when he loads Harry Potter's bloodline, he becomes Harry Potter with a Saiyan body. Of course, at present his physical strength is slightly stronger than that of ordinary people, and the superposition of the two does not seem to make much difference. At most, he is stronger than a normal little wizard. But if you develop further, wait until his strength reaches the level of the Goku template, and then load the Harry Potter template, then he will become a magical Saiyan. If the Wukong template is added, he will become Wukong with double strength, directly 280 combat power. In fact, this is nothing. The more protagonist templates are unlocked later, and the more bloodlines and abilities are superimposed, the more powerful he will become, and there will be almost no weaknesses. Roar! With a roar, the wizard's robe was torn on the spot, and Hawking once again transformed into a terrifying giant ape 14 to 15 meters tall. Only this time, he clearly noticed a difference. It's not that the combat power has been reduced a lot, that's for sure. The giant ape that is now incarnated does not seem to have any difference in appearance from before, but the combat power is completely different. Before, it was a giant ape incarnated by Wukong with a combat power of 140, and the combat power was as high as 1,400 points. But now it is the giant ape incarnated by his original body with a combat power of 10. The combat power is at most 100, which is not as high as the combat power of Wukong before his transformation. But bluffing is still enough. As long as he doesn't take action, others will definitely think that his strength is as terrifying as before. What really surprised him was that after transforming into a giant ape, he clearly felt that the anger and desire for destruction could be suppressed. Now he can completely control the giant ape form very rationally, just like an advanced Saiyan warrior like Vegeta. And he also vaguely felt that if he wanted to, he could suppress the anger and destructive desire with all his strength in order to release the giant ape form and return to its normal form. This allows him to freely control his transformation and switch forms even when the moon is full. After Harry Potter's wizard blood was superimposed on his own Saiyan blood, it perfectly solved the shortcomings of lower-level Saiyan warriors who were irrational after transforming into giant apes, and also solved the shortcomings of Man Yu's inability to control the transformation. Chapter 26. Boy, I owe you a favor. Could it be that the wizard's bloodline is also spiritual? Recalling the wizards in Harry Potter, they never seem to lack magic power when casting spells. Maybe the blood of wizards mainly lies in the soul and spirit. Use your spirit to transform the infinite energy of the outside world into magic power, thereby performing magic. Therefore, if wizards use too much magic, they will feel a little mentally exhausted at most, but they will not run out of magic power. There are also some evil black magic that can pollute the spirit. If a young wizard does not learn magic and is mentally stimulated, he will become obscurant. The stronger the spiritual will, sometimes the power of magic will increase. Some wizards will turn into ghosts when they die. Voldemort's soul can still possess animals after death, and then recreate the body and resurrect it. All signs seemed to confirm his suspicion. He boldly hypothesized that the lower-level Saiyan warriors transformed into giant apes because their minds could not suppress the anger and desire to talk nonsense in their blood, and thus lost their minds. Because he had his own spiritual superposition, he could still maintain a trace of sanity in the giant ape state. Therefore, now that he has the great spiritual blessing of the wizard bloodline, he can truly transform into a giant ape like a superior Saiyan warrior while maintaining his sanity. Of course, these are all his own guesses based on his knowledge of the two bloodlines. Whether this is the case or not, he is not sure. Anyway, as long as it develops in a good direction, who cares? That Professor Charles was just joking. I think your proposal just now is very good, and it is not impossible to consider. At this time, Nick Fury on the Quinjet looked at Hawking, who had transformed into a giant ape again, and made some awkward remarks. How about playing? One moment he transforms into a child, and the next moment he transforms into a giant ape. How could he do this so casually? It made him think that I had the advantage. On the other side, Captain Marvel, who had just breathed a sigh of relief, couldn't help but frown when he saw Hawking transforming into a giant ape again. But she also discovered something different, that is, the giant ape's eyes were red and crazy just now, like a monster that only knew fighting and destruction. Now the giant ape's eyes have lost their redness, and are still turning around, and his temperament suddenly seems cunning. This also prevented her from attacking immediately. Maria, don't fight yet. At this time, Nick Fury's voice happened to come from her earphones. It was Nick Fury who wanted to negotiate with Professor X, so he told her not to attack the giant ape again for the time being. Similarly, while Hawking was thinking about what to do next, Professor X's voice also sounded in his ears. Hawking, how are you doing now? Can you maintain your sanity? Because of the anti-peeping function of the panel, the panel will not help Hawking intercept these, it just prevents his existence from being noticed by others. In fact, when Huo Jingding transformed into a giant ape, Professor X clearly felt that his mind had calmed down after transforming again. Professor, I can now control my current situation. Okay, let's stop fighting first. Nick Fury just now Professor X told Hawking the contents of the negotiation he just had with Nick Fury. Hawking thought for a while and then replied, okay, but Professor, judging from the situation just now, we can't completely believe that the other party will keep his promise. If we do this again, Nick Fury, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D and the chief agent, is not a man of principles and integrity. He is only willing to be forced by the situation. If a situation arises, negotiations may break down at any time. For example, knowing Hawking's true strength now, knowing the timeliness of his transformation, etc. So it's best to take full control of the situation, so as to avoid subsequent troubles. Okay, I'll do as you say. I'll let him come out for an interview, and then I'll hold him back to buy you some time. After hearing Hawking's proposal, Professor X thought for a moment and then agreed. Because of Nick Fury's performance just now, he also became less trusting of the leader of an organization similar to the CIA. I guess at least we don't have to fight now. Hawking looked at Captain Marvel across from him, trying hard to suppress the instinct of Saiyan blood. His body quickly shrank and turned into a child again. You're right, kid, but I suggest you wear some clothes. Captain Marvel landed opposite Hawking and smiled as he looked at Hawking, who was completely naked. Passing the wand from his right hand to his left hand, Hawking quickly picked up a fragment of a wizard's robe on the ground with some embarrassment and wrapped it around his waist. The transformation had just broken the wizard's robe, and now that he had recovered, his body had no clothes to wear. At this time, X-Fighters and Quinjet fighters also landed next to them. Opening the hatch, Professor X led the mutants, Nick Fury led Captain Carter and S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, and walked out almost at the same time. I'm going to find something to wear inside. Of course, if I need to fight next, I don't have to go. I'm ready to transform at any time. Seeing the two sides meeting, Hawking pointed at the X-Fighter and said jokingly, I think our relationship will be harmonious in the future. Listening to Hawking's semi-threatening joke, Nick Fury squinted his one eye and tried to show a kinder expression. He has now classified the mutant boy in front of him into a highly dangerous level, even comparable to Professor. If this guy goes crazy in the city, it will definitely be a huge disaster. I also think this is just a misunderstanding. Just make it clear. Hawking, go and change your clothes in peace. At this time, Professor X also smiled cooperatively. That's best. Hawking nodded, then turned around and got on the X-Fighter. Recover as before. After boarding the fighter plane, he immediately cast a repair spell to restore the wizard's robe to its original shape, then quickly mounted the firebolt, put on the invisibility cloak, and slowly flew out again. The wizard's robe was torn when he first transformed, but he kept the firebolt, invisibility cloak, and wand in his hands for good protection. Entering the fighter plane to change clothes is just a reasonable excuse to leave temporarily. Completely covered by the wide invisibility cloak, Hawking rode the firebolt and carefully bypassed the negotiating and confrontation parties, and then quietly came to the hatch of the Quinjet. He carefully controlled the firebolt and flew into the Quinjet. After a search, he soon found Magneto and Mystique, who had been brought down by anesthesia. Everyone is petrified. Everything is petrified. Two lightning-fast full-body binding spells locked the two S.H.I.E.L.D. agents guarding Magneto and Mystique in place, and Hawking pointed the wand at Magneto and Mystique. Resuscitate quickly. The resuscitation spell is a spell that can make people wake up instantly no matter what state they are in. Good evening, we meet again. As soon as Magneto and Mystique opened their eyes, they saw Hawking's smiling face that seemed to be floating in the air, and they almost thought they saw Gooey. After roughly understanding what happened, Magneto looked at Hawking and said, Boy, I owe you a favor. Chapter 27. The situation is reversed. What? S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are not allowed to enter the mutant school, they are not allowed to spy on mutant students and their families, and they are not allowed to disrupt your lives. Professor Charles, are your demands too much? As S.H.I.E.L.D., which maintains the peace and security of the entire human race, we have the right to interfere with any existence that threatens human security. Nick Fury replied in an angry tone. For some reason, since he came down for face-to-face negotiations, he found that Professor, how is it possible that S.H.I.E.L.D. has already intervened and you still want to go back to your previous life? Even if the attack on the president really has nothing to do with you, it is undeniable that our Mr. Kurt is the executor. He does have the ability to transform, which is a threat in itself. Professor Charles, I can agree to your other requests, but there is one thing. All mutant information must be recorded in S.H.I.E.L.D. database, so that we can respond in time when danger occurs. Of course, I can assure you that these mutant-related information will only exist in our S.H.I.E.L.D. database and will not be leaked to any other agency, including the CIA and FBI. Nick Fury gave his final bottom line. Director Fury, I also tell you clearly that this is impossible. Most mutants are not as dangerous as you think. Instead, they have been facing various dangers brought by humans. If there is a crisis because of mutants, you can inform me and I will take my X-Men to solve it. Professor X decisively rejected Nick Fury's request because this was also his bottom line. Professor Charles, you have to understand that if you continue to fight, you will definitely lose in the end. I just don't want the situation to get out of control, so I am willing to negotiate with you here. Nick Fury's tone also became stronger. Professor X doesn't trust him, and he also doesn't trust Professor. Besides, they still have the upper hand at the moment. He feels in his heart that as long as he persists until the end, Professor X will still be the one to compromise. As Nick Fury's voice fell, the atmosphere instantly became solemn. Just when the situation was about to break out, a cold voice suddenly broke the stalemate. Charles, I have said long ago that humans have always been like this. They are always afraid of creatures that are different from them. Sooner or later, all us mutants will be exterminated. Now you should realize it. Magneto. Hearing this voice, Nick Fury's pupils shrank instantly and he turned to look at Magneto, Mystique and Hawking who were coming off the Quinjet. Only then did he realize that Hawking had disappeared and never appeared. He was not changing clothes in the fighter plane. Instead, he somehow sneaked into the Quinjet under his nose and rescued Magneto and Mystique. Careless. Nick Fury quickly turned to look at Captain Marvel next to him. Catch him. Snapped. Magneto snapped his fingers and the brainwave jammers around Nick Fury, Captain Marvel, Captain Carter and all S.H.I.E.L.D. agents instantly shattered. Immediately afterwards, it fell into a stagnant state as if time had stood still. Hawking's purpose in releasing Magneto was not to join forces with him to defeat Surprise. With his current strength, there was no chance of winning even if they joined forces. His purpose is to have Magneto destroy the brainwave interference device so that Professor X's terrifying mind control ability can be used. Eric, they cannot represent the entire human race. Don't give up on humanity completely like this. Professor X replied with a smile. Magneto just shook his head and said nothing more. He couldn't convince Charles, and Charles couldn't convince him. As old friends and rivals for decades, they are the people who know each other best. At this moment, Captain Marvel roared and broke free from Professor X's mental control. I advise you not to move, otherwise they may all die. Hawking was not surprised when he saw this, and pointed at Nick Fury and others who were immobilized. Because Captain Marvel has absorbed the huge energy of the light speed engine, he can basically no longer be regarded as a human being. The energy in his body is explosive, and his resistance in all aspects is terrible. There are no shortcomings at all. Therefore, although Professor X's mental control has an impact on her, it does not play a decisive role. What do you want? Captain Marvel looked at Professor X with a solemn expression. She naturally knows the abilities of Magneto and Professor X, and understands that no matter how fast she is, she will definitely not be able to move faster than Professor. Besides, there are also Hawking, who can transform into a giant ape at any time, and Magneto, who is also not easy to mess with. We just don't want to be disturbed, and we don't want to start a war with humans. Please tell Director Fury that I will bring Colonel Stryker and the evidence of his crime to your headquarters in 2 days to have a good talk. Professor X left a few words and took everyone on board the fighter plane. When the X-fighters completely disappeared from the sky, Nick Fury and others completely returned to normal. Fury, how are you? Upon seeing this, Captain Marvel immediately stepped forward and expressed concern. Nick Fury looked at all the mutants and X-fighters that suddenly disappeared around him. Confusion flashed in his eyes, and then he reacted and looked at Captain Marvel. Did Professor X activate his ability? Yes, he asked me to tell you. Captain Marvel nodded and roughly explained what had just happened. After listening, Nick Fury couldn't help but sigh. It seems that the Avengers will be formed as soon as possible. Director Fury, I actually think what Professor Charles said is quite reasonable. They are also victims. At this time, Captain Carter came over with a shield. Influenced by her former lover Steve, she has some ideological conflicts with the current Nick Fury. This time she came here to help capture the mutants who attacked the president. But for now, it seems that the real mastermind is not a mutant. If she had known this was the case, she would not have helped Nick Fury fight. She might as well have gone to find Steve who had disappeared, or go to the hospital to see Bucky who was seriously ill in bed. In 1945, in order to prevent the Red Skull from releasing Hydra from a different space, she pushed the Hydra into the different space by herself, and then struggled to kill it inside. We made an appointment to go dancing with Steve, but when the space opened again we didn't see Steve, Howard, and Bucky, but a one-eyed bald black man. He calls himself Nick Fury and is the director of S.H.I.E.L.D, which was a strategic science corps back then. The sad thing is that in just a few minutes in a different space, 55 years have passed outside. Howard is dead, Bucky is old, and her lover Steve Rogers disappeared 55 years ago and his whereabouts are still unknown. Chapter 28 Strong Alliance. At the same time, on the X-Fighter flying to New York, Professor X looked at Magneto with a solemn expression and said, I just read the director's memory. Human beings are stronger than we thought, and the Earth is not that safe. Maybe we should put aside some conflicts for the time being. The moment Magneto shattered the brainwave jammer, in addition to immobilizing everyone in S.H.I.E.L.D, he also took the opportunity to read the memory of director Nick Fury, and also learned about the existence of the Skrulls and the Kree. If it were before, he would still be confident that he and the X-Men could protect the students in the school and slowly change human beings' prejudice against mutants so that humans and mutants can live in harmony. Well, after today's battle and reading Nick Fury's memory, he understood that it was very difficult. If it hadn't been for Hawking's temporary outbreak, all of them would have been captured by S.H.I.E.L.D. To be honest, he was very lucky to have gone to Sokovia and recruited Hawking to become a student at the mutant school. So at this moment, he shared the information he knew with Magneto, hoping that Magneto could come back and deal with the situation with him like he did in the first battle, even if it was only temporary. Charles, I can cooperate with you, but you have to understand that if I have the chance, I will destroy mankind and create a world with only mutants. If the whole world is full of mutants, I think those so-called aliens are nothing. Magneto looked at Professor X, his expression still arrogant. He has always believed that mutants are the next step in human evolution, beings that are more advanced than humans, and can even be said to be gods. Mutants are not afraid of aliens that humans cannot deal with. The premise is to first get rid of the shameless humans who like to fight and stab each other. When that time comes, I will stop you. At least until then we are fighting for the interests of mutants. Professor X replied with a smile. He didn't expect Magneto to be really cooperative, as long as a preliminary consensus was reached. Seeing Professor X and Magneto holding hands together, Hawking couldn't help but nodded inwardly. The combination of Magneto and Professor X is definitely 1 + 1 greater than 2. A true powerful combination. Professor X's strength is to deal with all living and thinking creatures, and his weakness is those cold machines and high-tech weapons. Magneto is just the opposite. All high-tech weapons rarely leave metal, so they must be restrained by Magneto. Hawking, I have decided not to call you little monkey anymore. How about calling you ape demon? Or Donkey Kong is also good. At this time, Wolverine lit a cigar, smiled and patted Hawking on the shoulder. Having seen the place where he was experimented on and tortured Stryker, he has recovered most of his memories and untied the knot in his heart. So he decided to make X Academy his new home, and truly join the X-Men. Maybe he could occasionally be a guest teacher in the school, teaching combat and history. It should still be the ape demon or the ape god. Donkey Kong sounds too corny. At this time, Hawking, who was feeling relaxed, no longer cared about being nicknamed, and instead chatted with Wolverine. Death Girl, who was sitting behind the two of them, looked at Wolverine, who was chatting with Hawking in front of him with a very complicated expression. Her real name is Yuriko Koyama, a martial artist from Osaka and a mutant with the ability to heal herself. Stryker came to her a few years ago and told her that her father, who had disappeared for several years, died at the hands of Wolverine, and showed her a video of Wolverine killing his father. In order to seek revenge from Wolverine, she joined the new Weapon X transformation plan. As a result, after the transformation was successful, she did not embark on the road of revenge to find Wolverine as she wished. Instead, she was controlled by Stryker using the brain fluid of the Illusion Master to become a killing machine. During the past few years of being controlled, she also learned the real reason why her father was killed. It turns out that his scientist father was one of the scientists who was forcibly kidnapped from Osaka by Stryker to help complete the Weapon X program. The video of his death at the hands of Wolverine was actually an accidental manslaughter by Wolverine when he escaped from the base. So the real murderer of her father should be Stryker. Hi, Beauty, if you have nowhere to go, you can come to X College. I think the professor will welcome you very much. At this time, Wolverine also noticed Death Girl's gaze behind him and smiled and extended the invitation. He felt sorry for accidentally killing Death Girl's father, and was very grateful that Death Girl was willing to help them fight against S.H.I.E.L.D's attack after she regained consciousness. Yes, the school should be in short supply of teachers in the future. At this time, Hawking nodded in agreement. For him, the stronger the mutant school, the better, which means that he, Wanda, and Pietro are safer. More than 40 minutes later, the loading time for the Harry Potter template ended. Hawking looked at the disappearing firebolt and invisibility cloak next to him, and couldn't help but think to himself before closing his eyes, since there are even firebolts and invisibility cloaks, maybe the Wukong template can also have some assault clouds. Let's try shouting it next time when loading the template. When Hawking was unconscious due to the side effects of the template, Professor X also looked over. Little Hawking, are you a mutant? He could not read Hawking's mind, nor could he sense the unique mutant brain waves emitted by Hawking, so he could not determine whether Hawking was a mutant at all. But based on Hawking's ability and the tail growing on his butt, it was judged that he was most likely a mutant. But after tonight's battle, he was not so sure. Because Hawking has shown so many abilities, such as powerful body and energy, giant ape transformation, summon weapons and clothes with special abilities, etc. This was beyond his knowledge of mutants. At least so far, he had never seen any mutant with so many abilities. Forget it, whether you are or not, you are still a student of our school and a future X-Men. At the end of the day, Professor X was relieved. In fact, it is no longer that important to worry about whether Hawking is a mutant. Hawking goes to a mutant school and fights to protect mutants, so he is part of this big family. What's more, even if Hawking is not a mutant, his brother Pietro is 100% a mutant. That's it. Charles, sometimes I really envy you. There are too many elites in your school, but unfortunately many of them are wasted by you. Magneto, who was standing next to Professor X, was also looking at Hawking. Compared to the few in his fraternity, there are simply too many talented mutants in Charles' school. Eric, this is a school where I am. Not all students like fighting. They should have their own choices for the future. Professor X explained with a smile. Magneto shook his head after hearing this. But if they don't learn to fight, how can they protect themselves in the dangerous human society? Let's not talk about this anymore. It will take more than 2 hours to get to school. How about the next game? Professor X took out a chess set from a drawer of the fighter plane. Upon seeing this, Magneto took off his helmet and put it aside, and also showed a rare smile. I'll let you. No, you won't. Professor X also smiled. At this moment, they seemed to have returned to the past. Chapter 29 Edman Alloy Wand. Such a short time has passed. Hawking woke up again and found that he had only been unconscious for an hour, and he was a little surprised. This time he used the Wukong template and the Harry template together. Unexpectedly, the side effects were the same as when he only used the Wukong template. It was obvious that the loading of Harry Potter's protagonist template had no side effects on his current body. He estimated that with his current physical fitness, he could completely withstand the side effects of the Harry Potter template. After all, the wizard's physical condition was not much stronger than that of a normal person. He turned around and looked around. Professor X is playing chess with Magneto, and Mystique squats between the two, looking at Professor Storm, and Cyclops were flying the plane in front, and Wolverine and Death were sitting together, seemingly chatting about their past, which made him always feel that these two people might have an affair in the future. Nightcrawler and Colossus are about the same age. One is a kind and devout Christian, and the other is a gentle and good-tempered art lover. They seem to get along very well. As for Colonel Stryker, he had been forced into a coma by Professor X's mind control and was lying on the seat at the back of the plane. We can't keep this guy. The murderous look in Hawking's eyes flashed away. Professor X planned to hand over Colonel Stryker to Nick Fury, but he didn't think that was a good idea. First of all, with Stryker's power and background, once he returns alive, as long as he operates well, it is not impossible to escape. With his hatred for mutants, he doesn't know what trouble he will cause in the future. Don't underestimate ordinary humans in the Marvel world. Due to the influence of various black technologies, it is not impossible for Stryker to create a super mutant one day. Another version of Deadpool, no. 11, is an example. Secondly, killing an executioner like Stryker will definitely bring a lot of justice to the account, so it would be a pity to let him go. Anyway, in his eyes, Stryker is definitely a complete bad guy. Your son is a mutant who killed your wife by mistake. Instead of thinking about how to cure your son, you cruelly turned him into an experimental subject. You also killed all the mutants and experimented on many innocent mutant children. This is simply crazy. Moreover, for his own weapon, such a person does not deserve to die. Who else deserves to die? Killing him is definitely a very just thing. Finally, Stryker can be said to be one of the humans who knows the most about mutants in the world. If he falls into the hands of Nick Fury will have more information about mutants. Then the future is not a good one for the mutant school. Especially now, S.H.I.E.L.D. may still be Snake's shield. S.H.I.E.L.D. has mastered the information and experimental data of mutants, which means that Hydra also has the information and experimental data of mutants. Although Nick Fury is arrogant, he at least has a bottom line. The people of Hydra don't know what the bottom line is, and who knows what will happen in the future. However, with Professor X's character, he would not let him kill Stryker just like that. It's okay. You can talk to Lao Wan about this matter. Lao Wan definitely doesn't want Stryker to be alive. It won't be a big problem if we cooperate when the time comes. Looking away from Stryker, Hawking began to close his eyes and sort out the newly acquired memories of Harry Potter. Now he already has the same wizard blood as Harry in his body, and also has all the memories of Harry's 14 years. As long as he practices diligently in the future, he will be able to master all the spells in Harry's memory. Harry's memory stayed at the end of the Goblet of Fire and Voldemort's resurrection, which meant that at least the curses from the 1st to 4th years of Hogwarts were in his memory. In addition, there are the Patronus charm taught by Professor Lupin and some various magic spells seen in the library. It's just that although Harry has learned a lot of spells, he is not proficient in using them. except for some combat spells like disarming spells that he is good at. Other spells are much worse than Hermione at the same time. But this does not affect Hawking. As long as he spends more time practicing, he may not be able to practice those spells that Harry is not good at better than Hermione. It seems it's just blood and nothing else. This is also a problem. At this moment, he thought of something again and raised his hand to touch his forehead. The lightning mark belonging to Harry did not exist. After loading the protagonist template, all he gets is the protagonist's bloodline and memory, and everything else will disappear. For example, the lightning mark on his forehead and the remnant soul of Voldemort in his body are all foreign things and do not belong to the bloodline, so naturally they will not be retained. But a problem arises, that is, although he has wizard blood now, he doesn't have a wand. Although it is not necessary to have a wand to perform magic, Harry does not know how to cast spells without a wand, so naturally he does not know how to do it. Moreover, the magic wand serves as a stabilizer and power amplifier for magic. Without the assistance of the magic wand, the effect of magic will be greatly reduced. Especially for a beginner like him, it is simply impossible to achieve stable spell-casting success. Can I only cast magic when the Harry panel is loaded? No, he rejected this idea immediately as soon as it came out. He must not give up such a useful ability like magic. 1 hour is too short. He must find a way to solve this limitation. Perhaps we can borrow some of this world's black technology. After thinking for a while, he suddenly had some ideas in his mind. How are magic wands made? In fact, it is to select some wood with special materials, add some parts of the body of some magical creatures, and then make it through special treatment. For example, Harry's wand is made of holly wood and phoenix feathers, Voldemort's is made of yew and phoenix feathers, and Snape's wand is made of birch wood and snake nerves. The Elder Wand, one of the most famous 3 holy wands, is made of elder and the straw-tail feathers. There was no way he could find those materials in this world, and even if he found them, he wouldn't be able to make them without the skills. But here is Marvel, a marvel full of black technology, whether it is superpowers, magic, or any other weird ability. As long as we find capable scientists, we can use the power of science to imitate and confront them. Similarly, the magic wand may not be something that cannot be analyzed from a scientific perspective. By studying its characteristics, we can find other ways to make similar things instead. Maybe if it goes well, he can enchant the long adamantium alloy stick he obtained before to add the properties of a wand. Thinking about how I poked you with a stick and you firmly grasped it with both hands, thinking you had blocked the attack, and then I hit you in the face and gnawed the big melon. It seemed very interesting. For example, for an enemy with self-healing ability like Wolverine, if you just stick a stick into the stomach and then cast an explosion spell, the effect will definitely be good. It just so happens that the Mutant Academy is also a place where black technology is relatively popular. When he gets some time, he can ask Professor X if there is any suitable scientist he can recommend. Chapter 30 It's Better to Be My Sister. As time passed, when the sun was just rising in the early morning, the plane finally arrived in New York and slowly landed in the backyard of the temporary shelter villa. As soon as he got off the plane and entered the villa, Hawking plunged into the basement where supplies were stored. His body was already ravenous from the previous high-intensity battle. When you're hungry, everything you eat is delicious. After a good beating, Hawking walked out of the basement with a satisfied look on his face. He finally understood why Wukong tasted so delicious every time he ate, because he was really hungry. Hawking. As soon as he walked out of the basement and entered the lobby on the first floor, a figure in pajamas rushed towards him, jumped up and landed on him. Taking a closer look, it was little Wanda. It's only 6 o'clock now. Why did you get up so early? Hawking patted Wanda on the back, put her down in surprise and asked. According to Wanda's habit, she usually doesn't get up that early unless the sun is basking her butt or her mother Alina is urging her. You were not here last night. I have been worried. I got up when I heard some movement outside in the morning. Professor Orr told me that you were in the basement. Wanda started to chirp, and Hawking felt warm in his heart. To be honest, this feeling of being cared about and cared about all the time is really nice. He had never received this kind of treatment in his previous life. Where's Pietro? Pietro is still sleeping. He's sleeping like a baby. He even stole my pudding last night. Wanda kept complaining angrily. What, Pietro is so bad? Next time I will help you repair him. Come on, here are the lollipops I got from the basement. You and Pietro had one each, but now they are all yours. After pulling little Wanda to comfort her for a while, Hawking secretly sighed inwardly. After all, she is better as a younger sister. He knew that he felt sorry for Gigi. As for the younger brother, it's okay if you don't want him. Hawking is the best. Wanda took the 2 lollipops, immediately hugged Hawking's arms, stood on tiptoes and kissed him on the forehead. But you can't eat it now. You have to wait until you brush your teeth. Otherwise it will be bad for your teeth passing through the living room and entering the corridor. As soon as he turned the corner, he met Magneto, who was also ready to rest and catch up on his sleep. Wanda, please go back to your room first. I have a few words to say to this old gentleman. With a thought in his heart, he coaxed Wanda away, and Hawking stopped Magneto. Mr. Eric, if you don't mind, do you have time to chat? Of course, I enjoy chatting with you. Seeing Hawking actively looking for him, Magneto was naturally willing. Under pressure from S.H.I.E.L.D. and Captain Marvel, he temporarily joined forces with Charles again, but that was only temporary, and the two would part ways sooner or later. It would be great if Hawking could be abducted. In fact, this was one of the reasons why he readily agreed to Charles' invitation. I would like to know what Mr. Eric thinks of Colonel Stryker's treatment. Hawking spoke tentatively. Magneto replied without any hesitation, in my opinion, it's best to kill him. However, your Professor Charles disagrees. He wants to use it to ease the relationship with S.H.I.E.L.D. and make them think that we are gentle and not aggressive. It is really naive. Having said this, Magneto couldn't help but sneered. If it weren't for the fact that he and Charles had just eased their relationship and promised that Charles would not kill anyone without his consent, he would have killed Stryker on the plane. What S.H.I.E.L.D. fears is our strength, not our attitude. If our strength is not enough, the better our attitude, the more dangerous it will be. That Colonel Stryker cannot live. He knows too many mutant secrets. Seeing that Eric's attitude was consistent with his own judgment, Hawking no longer concealed his opinion. It's a pity that I promised Charles that I can't take action. Magneto shrugged. Hawking heard this and smiled. Just because you can't take action doesn't mean that I can't take action. I didn't promise the professor anything, but in order to prevent the professor from stopping me, you need to do me a little favor. Ha ha ha, very good, Hawking, you are really good. I appreciate you more and more. Upon hearing Hawking's plan, Magneto was stunned for a moment, then laughed. He really didn't expect that Hawking would have such courage and dare to go against Charles's decision to come to him for cooperation. You must know that even Logan, the most decisive Wolverine, gave up the opportunity to kill Stryker for revenge under Charles's persuasion. On the contrary, Hawking, who had no hatred against Stryker, was determined to kill Stryker. I just want to better protect the school. Hawking spread his hands, looking innocent. Magneto King showed a meaningful expression. Actually, the things I have done in my life are just to better protect mutants. Hawking, you and I are really alike. Please consider joining my brotherhood again. Let's talk about this later. Seeing that Magneto agreed to help him, Hawking was too lazy to listen to his theories. He quickly waved his hand and returned to the room where he and Wanda brother and sister lived. In this regard, Magneto did not do much to stop him. He just looked at Hawking's back and murmured, perhaps, if you can always be here, it would be good to replace Charles in the future. He felt that even if Hawking did not join his brotherhood, It would be a good outcome if he grew up and replaced Charles as the leader of the mutant school in the future. With the character shown by Hawking, sooner or later the School of Mutants will take the same path as him. 2 days later, in the main square of the mutant school, Hawking said goodbye to the reluctant Wanda, and the somewhat reluctant Pietro followed Professor X, Magneto, and Mystique, escorted Colonel Stryker, and boarded the X-Fighter again. This time, their destination was the headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D, the Tri-Wing building in Washington, D.C. In less than 2 days, the current school for mutants has returned to being the school for gifted teenagers in the eyes of outsiders. Everything that happened in the past few days seemed to have never happened. This also allowed Hawking to once again see the horror of Professor X's ability. To be honest, if Professor It is indeed terrifying to delete and modify memories at will on a large scale. It was precisely because of this that he suddenly paid attention to the 2 curses in Harry Potter's memory. That is the forgetting spell and the false memory spell, which can also modify and delete memories. After experiencing the Chamber of Secrets incident in the 2nd grade, Harry knew these 2 spells, but Harry did not focus on these 2 spells at all, unlike Hermione who could apply them skillfully. Harry could actually use these 2 spells, but the effect would most likely be to turn the target of the spell into an idiot. So these 2 curses also exist in Hawking's memory. Chapter 31 Beast Hank. In fact, sometimes when studying Harry's memory, Hawking would have some misconceptions, that is, some magic spells in the wizarding world. Even if the release fails, it doesn't seem too bad. Because sometimes the power of a failed magic release is greater than a successful release. Just like attacking an enemy with a forgotten spell that you haven't mastered yet, and turning them into idiots, the effect is not bad. There is also a story told in the textbook Standard Spells, Elementary. A wizard named Barafio said the F instead of an S because of an incorrect pronunciation when reciting the incantation. As a result, he found himself lying on the floor with a bison standing on his chest. Damn it, if this works well, there will never be a shortage of beef. Of course, it still depends on the situation, and you can't just cast spells randomly, because the effect of failed magic release is uncontrollable, and if it goes wrong, it may endanger itself. In Harry's memory, the teacher emphasized more than once the dangers of magic going wrong. Many wizards died as a result, so don't take chances. The wizard named Barafio died at the feet of the summoned buffalo. The gravity of a larger adult bison is basically about 1 ton. If a 1-ton bison suddenly appears on top of you and jumps on you like crazy, that is no joke. The buffalo is okay, but if it turns out to be a tiger, lion, elephant, poisonous snake, or a blue whale in the sea, it will really be a disaster. Hawking, actually you don't need to come. Eric and I are enough to handle all situations. After the plane took off, Professor X said to Hawking, although Hawking is powerful and extremely good at fighting, he is still a child after all. He still wants Hawking to do things at this age, study well and play happily like other children. Things like this that adults should take responsibility for should be handled by adults like them. Charles, this is also done to ensure nothing goes wrong. Since S.H.I.E.L.D has developed a machine to suppress Kai's abilities, their headquarters must have taken precautions. Perhaps from the moment you step into their headquarters, your abilities will be interfered with and rendered useless. And as you said, this time we are going to have friendly exchanges and ease the relationship, so I can't take the initiative to destroy their machines. With Hawking here, at least they won't dare to take advantage of your inability to ambush us, which is also a deterrent. Before Hawking could answer, Magneto was already explaining for him. According to Professor, I also want to do my part for the school. As long as the professor asks the cafeteria to prepare more food in the future. Hawking replied jokingly. Professor X also laughed when he heard this. Even if you don't come, you can eat freely in the cafeteria. You won't be hungry. Indeed, what Eric said makes sense. If Hawking is there to deter him, going to S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters this time will be much smoother. The director of S.H.I.E.L.D would never want little Hawking to turn into a giant ape and then wreak havoc in the capital of Washington. This would make many things much easier. After all, not everyone knows that little Hawking can only transform into a giant ape on a full moon night, and they don't know that little Hawking is still unable to fully master his abilities. Currently, there are only 6 people including Wolverine, Storm, Phoenix, Cyclops, Colossus, and him who know about little Hawking's situation. He has not even told Magneto, and told the other 5 to keep little Hawking's secret. Sit tight. Following the reminder from Mystique in the driver's seat, the X-Fighter quickly took off and became invisible, flying towards Washington. This time Cyclops, Storm, and the others all stayed at the school in case the school would be attacked again after they left. Therefore, the driver of the X-Fighter was replaced by Mystique, a mutant super agent who is proficient in various means of transportation, almost all national languages, and various hacking techniques. Professor, do you know any great scientists? On the plane, Hawking remembered that he wanted to make an adamantium alloy wand and asked Professor X. Professor X smiled and nodded. Of course I know. Hank McCoy, codenamed Beast, is also a member of the X-Men and a professor at the school. Many of the machines in the school were designed by him, but he was not in the school during this time, but in Washington, D.C. preparing the Department of Mutant Affairs. You should be able to see him in a while. If you want to integrate mutants into normal human life, it is not enough to just establish a mutant school and teach students to control their abilities freely. So another thing he's been doing, too, is trying to get the government to create a department just for mutants. In the future, matters related to mutants will be handled by this department. You know, not all parents will feel scared and hate their children after learning that they are mutants. A considerable number of parents love their children very much. Even if they know that they are mutants, they still hope that they can have a good life and future. And among this group of parents, there must be some who are high-ranking government officials and high-level members of society. In order for the children to be able to freely control their abilities without causing danger due to their abilities, he can easily convince these parents to send their children to his own school. Similarly, he can also use the parents of these children to influence the government to change its attitude towards mutants, thereby striving to establish a new department about mutants. Hank is currently in charge of this matter, and it has been quite effective. If Stryker hadn't controlled Nightcrawler to assassinate the president, he might have been able to achieve his goal in 3 to 5 years. Once the Ministry of Mutant Affairs is successfully established, if Stryker captures mutants for experiments in the future, it will be illegal and can be exterminated together with human forces. We can also obtain sufficient benefits for all mutants with legitimate reasons and peaceful means. But now, as long as the explanation is clear, the problem shouldn't be too big. Snort. Magneto over there just snorted and shook his head. He naturally knew what kind of mutant affairs department Charles was running, but he was quite unfavorable and even very resistant to it. In his view, Charles was digging his own grave. Unless all human leaders were replaced by mutants, the so-called Department of Mutant Affairs would be nothing more than a knife used by humans to deal with mutants. If the mutants resist, then humans will use mutants to deal with mutants. By the way, Hank the Beast, I almost forgot about him. At this time, Hawking also remembered that there was indeed a very powerful scientist among the mutants. He was a scientist at the CIA at first, and later joined the X-Men. Professor, this guy seems to still have a crush on Mystique. Thanks to Plusker/book friend 20,190,519,122,210,883 for the tip. Thanks to the Fierce Flames and Win, Give In, Jun Moyu, Baga, Dominate Eternity Zero, Sayo Wu Wang, Days and Dream Every Day, Single Life, Rainy and Sunny Days, Book Friends 20,190,311,065,624,807, Die Little Bug, Man in Dark Clothes, Call Me Guest Guan Yan, Thrawn, the Old Ruler of the Outer Gods, You will understand. 4,458,796. Book friend 20 quadrillion 230 trillion 726 billion 113,152,073. Book friend 20 quadrillion 220 trillion 123 billion 952,748. Bookworm in the A's. Mr. K. Book friend 202 trillion 104 billion 21,224,308. Love to Kill Baby. Axie, it's a monthly pass for the little cutie. Kamen Rider Pikachu. Chapter 32. Like facing a formidable enemy. In Washington, D.C., on the lawn of a manor somewhere far away from the city, the X-Fighter slowly landed. Professor, it's great to see you're okay. When King Huo pushed Professor X also smiled and replied, "This time it's all thanks to the new little Hawking, otherwise I might be in S.H.I.E.L.D. prison now. By the way, he just wants to ask you for some help." After that, he introduced Hawking to the beast. Hawking also said hello very politely. "Hello, Professor Hank." "Hello, little Hawking, what do you want from me?" Hank turned to look at Hawking, his eyes full of appreciation. Regarding Hawking's contribution to this rescue operation, Charles briefly mentioned it to him on the phone yesterday. "Professor Hank, when I activate my abilities, I will manifest a weapon with special abilities. This weapon can better help me exert my abilities. So I wanted to see if I could examine this weapon, extract its characteristics, and add them to other existing weapons." Hawking explained the wand's capabilities and general requirements in detail, using words that could be understood as much as possible. The beast nodded after listening. "This kind of thing is not that difficult, but the details will not be confirmed until I return to the school in a few days and use instruments to test the performance characteristics of your weapon." "Thank you very much, Professor Hank." When Hawking heard that there seemed to be something interesting, his eyes suddenly lit up. The beast smiled and waved his hand. "These are all small things. Helping students create things that assist their control abilities is part of my job. Long time no see. It seems that you finally stopped using your rubbish serum and returned to what you should be." At this time, Magneto also said hello. However, the beast obviously didn't like Magneto. He instinctively opened his mouth and roared at Magneto, and then he forced himself to calm down and replied, "Eric, I advise you not to do anything secretly without telling the professor, otherwise I won't let you go." "Hank, I haven't seen you for so long. Is this how you treat an old friend?" Mystique stepped forward and touched the beast's cheek. The beast looked at Mystique with a very complicated expression. "Raven, I hey." From the first time he saw Mystique, he fell in love with this very individual and lively woman, even though in the end Mystique left their original team with Magneto. But after 1973, Mystique suddenly changed her personality. Although the original Mystique hated human beings, it was not extreme, but later Mystique became extremely hateful of human beings. Even innocent people such as the elderly and children were never merciless when it was time to kill them. "Hank, you haven't experienced my pain and don't understand how cruel humans can be." Perhaps sensing the complexity in Hank's eyes, Mystique withdrew her hand. At this time, Hawking, who was listening to the conversation between the two, was moved in his heart. He knew that the pain Mystique was talking about should be referring to the cruel human experiments that had been conducted by Bolivar Trask. Bolivar Trask, a military scientist, the founder of Trask Industries and the former boss of Colonel Stryker. Compared with his old boss, Stryker was nothing. Trask believed that mutants and humans were not the same race and would eventually exterminate humanity. To this end, he began to capture mutants for experiments and create sentinel robots that could identify and kill mutants. During the years when Magneto was imprisoned for assassinating the president and professor in the future, powerful sentinel robots began to hunt mutants and all humans with mutant genes. Even Magneto and Professor X were defeated and could only reverse the future. Although this universe may not necessarily develop like this, he must be more vigilant. If there is a chance, he can find out in advance where the sentry robots are still being studied and destroy them. Presumably there should be a lot of justice value recorded. Let's go. I have prepared the car in advance. It will take some time for you to get there. After a moment of silence, the beast returned to normal and led Professor X and 4 others to the gate of the manor. The Tri-Wing Building, the headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D, is located on the Potomac River between Washington, D.C. and Virginia. It takes at least more than an hour to drive there. At the same time, in the director's office in the Sanqui Building. Did you find them? Nick Fury asked Hill, who was wearing a tight leather shield uniform in front of him, with his hands behind his back. Hill took the notebook in his hand and operated it a few times, and a projection immediately appeared on the wall of the office. They appeared at the gate of a manor in the suburbs half an hour ago and drove away quickly. According to the driving route, they should be heading in our direction. They will appear at the gate of the building in about 40 minutes. The images on the projection were exactly the pictures captured by the satellite of Professor. Immediately activate the large-scale brainwave interference device, covering the entire headquarters. Temporarily evacuate all non-combat units, and all combat agents will be on alert. As soon as they enter the headquarters, they will monitor me in all directions without blind spots. I must not let them make any small moves at the headquarters. Especially the mutant kid named Hawking. He may have some kind of invisibility ability. Let Barton keep a close eye on him and follow him even when he goes to the toilet. Nick Fury gave orders one after another with a serious expression. After experiencing the previous battle, he knew very well how destructive the 3 top mutants Magneto, Professor X, and Hawking could be together, and he had to treat it with the most serious attitude. Fury, don't worry so much. I don't think Professor Charles is a bad person, and besides he still has me. Captain Marvel saw Nick Fury looking like he was facing an enemy, so he stepped forward and took his hand to comfort him. Hill, who was still single over there, curled his lips, coughed and reminded Director about what the Minister of Defense said. Tell him not now. In 2 weeks I will hand over William Stryker to him intact and will not let him get hurt. Nick Fury frowned when he heard this. For Colonel William Stryker, because he was involved in the assassination of the president by mutants, he originally planned to imprison him for life after digging out all the information about mutants if the evidence was conclusive. However, I didn't expect that Trask Industries, which had deep cooperation with the military, seemed to have a deep connection with Colonel Stryker, and actually found the Minister of Defense as a lobbyist. Considering that it has only been a few years since he took over as director, many of S.H.I.E.L.D's subsequent development plans are inseparable from dealing with the government, and he has to sell this face. Chapter 33 S.H.I.E.L.D. Murder Incident. Loading the Harry Potter protagonist template. Seeing the tricurved wing building of S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters appearing in front, Hawking silently loaded the Harry template for himself. The wizard's rope, broomstick, invisibility cloak, and wand appeared in his hand at the same time. Hawking, our main purpose this time is to hand over Stryker and the evidence that he assassinated the president to S.H.I.E.L.D. It's best not to cause any unnecessary conflicts with them. Seeing Hawking activate his abilities, Professor X immediately reminded him. Hawking smiled with a very good expression. Professor, I know. I am just prepared. If I find that they have evil intentions, I can be ready to fight back as soon as possible. Professor X nodded when he heard this and thought it made sense. Mr. Stryker is probably thirsty too. Come on, drink some water. At this time, Hawking suddenly took out a bottle of water from the space next to him, and then slowly opened it. What a kind kid. With a look of appreciation on Professor, although Stryker was hateful, Hawking was able to put aside his prejudices and give him water at this time, which he appreciated very much. Mystique, who was driving, and Magneto, who was sitting in the passenger seat, looked at each other silently after hearing the noise behind them, and began to use their peripheral vision to observe the situation behind them through the reflector in front. Hawking had asked him for help before, asking for a poison that would be immediately fatal when taken into water, saying it was to be used to kill Stryker. Now he felt like Hawking was about to take action. It's just that he couldn't understand that if Stryker was poisoned at this time, Charles would definitely be angry, and it would be difficult for S.H.I.E.L.D. to explain. This didn't seem to be consistent with the IQ of the kid Hawking. But it doesn't matter. If there is a gap between Hawking and Charles, he can just step in as a third party, and there is nothing wrong with it. Or does Hawking have other ideas? Fluffy. Using a large wizard robe as a cover, Hawking unscrewed the mineral water bottle and poured a small tube of blue liquid into it. He then gently waved his wand at the mineral water bottle and whispered the transformation spell. The mineral water that was originally turned blue by poison instantly turned back to pure transparent color. Then he smiled and handed the restored bottle of mineral water to Stryker, who had just regained control of his body. Stryker took the bottle of mineral water and drank it all. He had been pinned down by Professor when Professor Magneto in front of him narrowed his eyes when he saw this. "Did you give up?" "No, there is definitely something wrong." The tube of blue liquid he asked Mystique to leave the academy to get was a very toxic venom. A normal person would die immediately if a drop of it entered the throat. If it wasn't poisoning, then with Hawking's personality, it would be impossible for him to be so kind as to feed Stryker water. But if it was poisoning, then why didn't Stryker do anything after drinking it? In view of the fact that Hawking suddenly activated his ability just now, he could only guess that Hawking might have used some kind of ability that he didn't understand. Done. Seeing Stryker drink the bottle of mineral water in one gulp, Hawking knew that his plan was successful. In fact, it is very simple to kill Stryker. The key is not to let Professor X find out, nor let S.H.I.E.L.D. find out. So Stryker has to die after they leave S.H.I.E.L.D., which is a bit troublesome. So he took stock of the various magics that Harry had learned in school. The magic in the world of Harry Potter is very magical, and some magic has distinctive characteristics when casting spells. For example, the killing curse will produce a green beam of light, the disarming curse will appear as a blue beam of light, the explosion curse will appear as a red beam of light, the rope curse will cause a rope to fly out, and the arrow release curse will shoot sharp arrows. Some magic spells have no obvious symptoms when they are cast, as long as the wand is pointed at the enemy and not too close. Just like the repairing spell, the levitating spell, the transformation spell, the whole body binding spell, the sleeping spell, etc. There are also very small parts that don't even require pointing a wand, similar to the summoning spell Harry used to summon the broomstick he kept in his dormitory when he subdued the fire dragon stone in the Goblet of Fire. As long as you think about that thing in your mind, you can summon it to yourself within a certain range. Of course, the premise is that no one can stop it, and it cannot be in a completely enclosed space. However, considering that even within S.H.I.E.L.D. he would have been immediately targeted by Nick Fury if he had performed asymptomatic magic that resulted in Stryker's death. It is speculated that they used some kind of mutant power to kill Stryker. So after some thought, he decided to use the transformation spell to solve it. The transfiguration spell is a magic that can change the form of an object. Once you learn this magic, you can turn an inanimate item into another inanimate item, turn an inanimate item into a living creature, turn a living creature into an inanimate object, and turn a living creature into another. Become another living creature. Specifically, it's like turning matches into needles, water into tea, and rum in first grade. Second grade turned beetles into buttons, rabbits into slippers, and tables into pigs. In third grade, I learned about the animagus, the transformation from humans to animals. In the fourth grade, there was a cross-species switch and the guinea fowl became a guinea pig. So although Harry is not that good at transformation spells, he can still easily do the first-year content of turning venom into pure water. It is also possible after Hawking loads the template. As for why, then we have to talk about some characteristics of the magic of transformation spell. The transformation spell follows Gamp's transformation law, which has many contents. The most important points are that you cannot transform things out of thin air, especially food. When transforming one thing into another, there will be a time limit based on the wizard's mastery of the transformation spell. It cannot be permanently transformed, nor can it really become another thing. It's like Hawking turned venom into pure water. When the pure water entered Striker's stomach, it was pure water. When the magic effect ends, the pure water will turn into venom. With Harry's mastery of the transfiguration spell, it wouldn't be a big problem for this effect to last for 3 to 4 hours. In other words, Striker seems to be fine now, but after 3 or 4 hours, the magical effect of the transformation spell disappears and the water in his stomach will immediately turn into venom and kill him on the spot. This is Hawking, prepared for S.H.I.E.L.D, the magical murder case. The car parked under the S.H.I.E.L.D building. As soon as the 5 people got out of the car, Agent Hill led a group of S.H.I.E.L.D agents and greeted them with a smile on their face. Just leave William Stryker to us. Director Fury is already waiting for 4 of them in the office on the top floor. No problem, please lead the way. Professor X nodded, but did not stop the S.H.I.E.L.D agents from taking over Stryker. Although Stryker did not speak before being taken away, there was a trace of sarcasm in his eyes, and he was not worried about falling into the hands of S.H.I.E.L.D. Charles, this is definitely a wrong decision. Seeing this, Magneto squinted and shook his head, but soon he saw Hawking wink at him. Chapter 34 Make a Friend. Really cautious. Following Agent Hill into S.H.I.E.L.D, Hawking was keenly aware of the surveillance cameras in every corner, which were quickly adjusted to focus on them, and rotated as they moved. It seems that no matter what small movements they make, they will be captured by these advanced high-end surveillance equipment. Moreover, the staff inside all look very strong and strong. The pistols worn at the waist are also made of special transparent materials and do not look like metal. Charles. At this time, Magneto glanced at Professor X, who shook his head. It was obvious that Magneto wanted to confirm whether Professor X's ability could still be used, but Professor X shook his head to indicate that it had been interfered with. Please rest assured that we are not hostile. We just want the next chat to be fair. The director very much hopes that we can have a friendly communication this time. Perhaps sensing Magneto's somewhat unpleasant expression, Agent Hill immediately explained with sincerity. Professor X smiled. It's understandable, I hope so too. Magneto snorted coldly. Hill always smiled and led the 4 Hawkings to the elevator. The director's office. Yes, Agent Hill. As Hill's voice fell, the elevator immediately rose rapidly after its mechanized reply. Does S.H.I.E.L.D have artificial intelligence in this day and age? When Hawking saw this, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. It's 2000 now. At this time, mobile phones outside are basically flip phones, but S.H.I.E.L.D can already maturely apply artificial intelligence programs. It can only be said that in the world of Marvel, the technological level of the public outside is no different from the real world, but when it comes to some special organizations, their black technology is far beyond reality. In fact, the same is true for mutant schools, which also have many black technology products. The director would like to ask Mr. Charles and Eric to speak alone. At the door of the director's office, just as Hawking was about to push Professor X in, he was stopped by Hill. Also stopped was Mystique. Is this the plan to defeat each other in case the negotiation breaks down? Hawking's heart moved. Professor X and Magneto obviously thought of this, but Professor X didn't mind. Then please, Agent Hill, please find a place where little Hawking and Raven can take a rest. He didn't come here with any hostility and believed that the negotiation would go smoothly, so he naturally didn't mind. This would also show Nick Fury their sincerity. Mr. Charles, please rest assured, we have prepared a special lounge. Hill still had a very professional smile. Hawking didn't care much about this. He felt that as long as Nick Fury did not have cerebral palsy, he would not conflict with them in Washington, a capital where high-ranking officials gather. And judging from Professor X's temper, he probably also values harmony. Even if there is a conflict, even if he can't transform into a giant ape, there is no need to be afraid with Professor X and Magneto here. This is a city, with steel and concrete everywhere. Magneto explodes with all his strength, and the entire S.H.I.E.L.D building will be destroyed, and the large disruptor will be disintegrated in an instant. So instead of following them in and listening to the three people discussing what they had and didn't have, it was better to rest outside. Anyway, with his current status, he wouldn't be able to speak even after entering. You two, please come this way. After closing the door of the director's office, Hill took Hawking and Mystique to a lounge far away from the office. There are a lot of snacks and drinks prepared there. However, 2 agents were also arranged to guard the door. They were still acquaintances. One was Hawkeye and the other was Black Widow. Are you taking action? After sitting down in the lounge, Mystique immediately asked Hawking cryptically. Hawking smiled and nodded. Don't worry, you won't see the sun tomorrow. When Mystique heard this, a bright smile immediately appeared on her face. No wonder Eric appreciates you so much. You are really good. In view of her painful experience of being dissected and experimented on, what she hates most is disgusting humans like Stryker who experiment on mutants. If Hawking didn't take action, she would find an opportunity to kill him afterwards. Brothers and sisters at the door, why don't you come in and sit down and make friends? Leaning on the sofa in the lounge, looking at Hawkeye and Black Widow who looked like door gods at the door, Hawking rolled his eyes and waved to them enthusiastically. From the current point of view, there should be no conflict with S.H.I.E.L.D in the short term. It is better to take the opportunity to build a relationship with these 2 future Avengers, which may be useful in the future. Human nature is complicated. Sometimes, someone who is an enemy today may become a friend tomorrow, so the relationship does not need to be so stuck. In the absence of any personal grudges, multiple friends and multiple paths are applicable everywhere. Looking at little Hawking, who was waving towards him with an innocent face, Hawkeye and Black Widow looked at each other and then walked in together. They were tasked with monitoring Hawking and Mystique, especially Hawking. Entering the house is obviously better for surveillance than at the door. At the same time, if information about Hawking can be obtained during the conversation, Nick Fury will definitely be very happy. Compared to Professor X and Magneto's almost transparent information, they knew nothing about Hawking, a student at the mutant school. The only information I know is what I witnessed during the battle that day. In fact, we can't blame S.H.I.E.L.D. Hawking appeared out of nowhere and appeared in the war-torn Sokovia. He was directly picked up by Professor X not long after. Even with S.H.I.E.L.D. intelligence capabilities, it would be impossible to find anything snort. Seeing Black Widow and Hawkeye walking into the lounge, Mystique snorted and closed her eyes. She doesn't like humans. My name is Hawking. What are my brother and sister called? Hawking took the initiative to pick up 2 bags of potato chips on the table, borrowed flowers and handed them to Hawkeye and Black Widow. Natasha. The Black Widow took the potato chips and showed a harmless smile. She only said her first name, but not her last name. Clinton or Patton. The same is true for Hawkeye, but compared to the disguised Black Widow, Hawkeye's expression is not as natural. He was knocked unconscious by Hawking with a stick. If he hadn't later seen the image of Hawking transforming into a giant ape to fight Captain Marvel, this would have been a stain on his life as an agent. After getting to know each other, Black Widow took the initiative to chat with Hawking about daily life, trying to get closer to Hawking. It can only be said that she is the most talented spy trained by the Red Room. Black Widow, who looks only 16 or 17 years old at this time, has already reached a master level in speaking skills and psychology. Even though Hawking knew that Black Widow was trapping him, he didn't feel any surprise or disgust at all. But he is certainly not stupid and would really leak his information. Chapter 35 Mr. Destiny Hawking. Actually, I have an ability that no one knows about. Seeing that you can chat with Sister Natasha so well, I made an exception and secretly told you. After chatting for a while, Hawking suddenly looked mysterious. What ability? Black Widow's eyes suddenly lit up, thinking that her chat for a moment had relaxed the vigilance of the kid Hawking. Hawking pretended to be proud and said, "Actually, this is not a natural ability, but a very advanced skill that I have learned since I was a child. I can roughly judge the fate of a person's life through the palm of his hand, which is commonly known as fortune-telling in our country, real or fake." Black Widow was doubtful. She instinctively felt that this ability was a bit ridiculous. "Of course it's true. If you don't believe me, I'll show it to you." Hawking took Black Widow's hand, took off its gloves, put it in front of his eyes and pretended to observe it for a while, then sighed, frowned and shook his head. "Sister Natasha, this is the fate of the evil star." "What is the lonely star of heavenly evil?" Black Widow looked confused. Although she can speak Chinese, it doesn't mean she knows some of the culture there. This evil star means that you are born with a bad fate. You will have a hard time during your youth, and you will not have a happy ending in the future. There's a high probability that you will be alone for the rest of your life, without marriage and without children. Hawking said plausibly. Of course he doesn't know how to tell fortunes, and he can't predict the future. What he loaded is Harry Potter, not Grindelwald, but he doesn't have a natural eye that can predict the future. It's just that Black Widow always wants to get information from him and tease her. Although what he said is indeed partly true. Sure enough, after hearing Hawking's words, Black Widow suddenly froze and fell into a somewhat emo state. She was born an abandoned baby in the Soviet Union in 1984. Later, he was adopted and trained by a government agency. Following the Soviet captain Alexei, Iron Lady Melina, and Yelena, who was also an orphan, they disguised themselves as a family of 4 and went to Ohio to perform a spy mission. After failing the mission, he was sent to the Red Room and received more cruel training under Mrs. B. During the process, her body was injected with enhanced genes, and she was forced to undergo a tube ligation surgery, permanently losing her fertility. During those years, as the best Black Widow, she was sent to various places to perform espionage and assassination missions, and her hands were stained with the blood of many innocent people, even children. Until 2 years ago, S.H.I.E.L.D. Hawkeye Barton was ordered to get rid of her, but she accidentally realized her wrong life and decided to join S.H.I.E.L.D. to atone for her past mistakes. So looking at it this way, what Hawking said seems to be quite correct. Am I going to be like this all my life? Black Widow feels a little sad inside. Compared to the Black Widow who was 16 or 17 years old at this time and who had experienced various Snake and S.H.I.E.L.D. missions 10 years later, her psychological quality was still worse. Hawkeye obviously saw something was wrong with Black Widow. He didn't believe that Hawking had any so-called ability to predict fate, so he stretched out his hand and said, "It's so awesome. Can you help me see it too?" He wanted to use facts to make Black Widow understand that what Hawking said was just a coincidence. Hawking naturally did not refuse. "Oh, you are quite good at this. You are destined to have many children and grandchildren." Glancing at the palm of Hawkeye's raised hand, he deceived him again. "I can tell from the palm of your hand that you didn't seem to have had a good life when you were young. It must have something to do with your family, but your future is very good. You will marry one of your colleagues and they will be together. Have at least 3 children." Barton, who had just picked up the water and was about to take a sip while watching Hawking's performance, was stunned. He did have a bad life when he was young, because he and his mother were robbed in a convenience store and killed the robber, resulting in his mother being imprisoned. Now in his 30s, he is in a relationship with a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent named Mockingbird and plans to get married in the next 2 years. Could it be that this mutant kid named Hawking really has the ability to see through fate? Then I really would have 3 kids. At this moment, he not only hoped that Hawking's ability was fake, because it meant that his good friend Natasha would also be happy in the future, but also hoped that Hawking's ability was real, because then his future would be very happy. Okay, Natasha, Barton, what's wrong with you? At this time, the door of the lounge was suddenly pushed open by Hill, but when she saw the expressions of Black Widow and Hawkeye, there was a look of confusion on her face. Why are the two generals of S.H.I.E.L.D, one looking disappointed and the other looking confused? Oh, have they reached an agreement? Then we can go. Sister Natasha, Barton, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. I'll chat with you again when I have the opportunity. Hawking immediately stood up, waved to Black Widow and Hawkeye, and then followed Hill out of the lounge with Mystique. Do you really know how to read people's fate? On the way to the director's office, Mystique asked Hawking in a low voice. Although she closed her eyes and fell asleep, she did not forget every word that the three of them chatted in the lounge. There is a black market mutant businessman, Caliban, who can occasionally see fragments of the future, so it does not seem impossible for Hawking to be able to see through people's fates, you guess. Hawking showed a meaningful smile. If you believe that I can see through fate, then you must take what I say in the future to heart. If the future changes and something I say is wrong, then I have not admitted that I can really see through fate. It is not, it is just your wishful thinking. Mystique reached out and pinched Hawking's face quickly. You little naughty boy, I think you should be nicknamed Destiny Boy. Wrong, it's Mr. Destiny. Hawking shrugged. Mystique looks like she is in her 20s or 30s, but her actual age is about the same as Professor. The two of them chatted and soon returned to the door of the office, and what caught their eyes were Nick Fury and the three of them, who seemed to be having a good conversation. I still hope we can cooperate more in the future. Nick Fury had a rare smile on his face. Professor X is easier to talk to than he thought. As long as the bottom line of mutant safety is not touched, many things are very easy to talk about. Although Magneto is more extreme and full of hostility to humans, he can still control the opponent. Therefore, the results of the current exchanges can be considered acceptable to all three parties for the time being. Professor, I'm hungry. It's time to have lunch now. Hawking took a step forward, talking to Professor X, but looked up at Nick Fury. Nick Fury is also a good person and immediately said, "Since it's noon, let's have a meal together. I happen to know a top-notch French restaurant that just opened. Since the communication went smoothly, it would not be a bad idea to have a meal by the way to deepen our relationship." When Hawking heard this, the corner of his mouth suddenly raised. He did it on purpose. In about an hour, the pure water in Stryker's body will turn into poison. By then, if they and Nick Fury work together, they can get rid of all suspicion. Chapter 36 Three-Party Constraints. Two cars, one red and one blue, drove towards the city from the entrance of the three-winged building. The red retro sports car in front is Coulson's favorite car, Lara, which has the ability to levitate and fly. Nick Fury, Captain Marvel, Black Widow, and Hawkeye are sitting in it. Following behind is the X-Chariot driven by Mystique, which has jet super acceleration and invisibility capabilities. Sitting inside are Hawking, Magneto, and Professor X. What's wrong with you two? In the co-pilot of the antique sports car Laura, Nick Fury keenly noticed through the reflector that Black Widow and Hawkeye sitting in the back seemed a little uneasy at this time. The kid named Hawking seems to have the ability to see through a person's destiny. Hawkeye did not hide anything and reported everything that happened in the lounge to Nick Fury in detail. Nick Fury pondered for a moment after hearing this, and then shook his head. You were deceived by him. This kid is young but has a very mature mind. Whether it's his performance in the previous battle or Natasha's failure to extract any useful information from him today, you can tell. What about what he said? There was some hesitation in Natasha's eyes. Nick Fury pointed to the brainwave jammer around his neck and explained. When Magneto broke our jammer, Professor Natasha and Barton are both top agents and would not be fooled so easily under normal circumstances. The main reason was that Hawking's identity as a mutant and his ability to exaggerate before were very convincing. What he said happened to be related to themselves, so they were deceived. However, the This also made Nick Fury look at Hawking with admiration. Even at such a young age, despite being so terrifying because of his mutant identity, he could actually use the information in his hands to successfully deceive two top agents. With such strength and brains, when he grows up, he may be more terrifying than Professor X and Magneto. That's it. It's a pity for my 3 children. Hearing Nick Fury's analysis, Black Widow and Hawkeye immediately reacted, but Hawkeye was obviously a little regretful. In the blue car behind them, Hawking also roughly learned the contents of their negotiations with Nick Fury during the conversation between Professor X and Magneto. Basically, S.H.I.E.L.D. has given up on registering and monitoring mutants, especially mutant schools, and will try its best to promote the establishment of the Department of Mutant Affairs so that mutants and humans can coexist peacefully. The corresponding condition is that when S.H.I.E.L.D. needs help from mutants with special abilities, Professor X must send X-Men to S.H.I.E.L.D. as much as possible to provide friendly support. As for Magneto, he definitely doesn't agree with letting people from the Brotherhood of Mutants help S.H.I.E.L.D. The condition given by Nick Fury is that the government will remove the wanted order against the entire Brotherhood of Mutants, but the premise is that Magneto and the Brotherhood of Mutants can no longer carry out terrorist attacks. If it is discovered that Magneto leads the Brotherhood of Mutants to carry out terrorist attacks again, then S.H.I.E.L.D. and Professor X will join forces to deal with the Brotherhood of Mutants. Hawking was not too surprised by this result. S.H.I.E.L.D. is connected to the World Security Council, and the members of the World Security Council are important leaders of various countries around the world. Professor X simply cannot refuse the conditions offered by Nick Fury. And originally in the timeline of Days of Future Past, Professor X had a plan to make humans accept mutants by developing the X-Men into superheroes, and it was actually implemented later. As for Magneto, he now has to agree to this condition. Unlike in the past, it doesn't matter even if he is wanted by the government, because his individual strength is so strong that he and the members of the Brotherhood of Mutants can break through the government's encirclement and suppression at any time. But S.H.I.E.L.D. is much more powerful than those in the government, whether it's technology or agents or Captain Marvel, who is so powerful. If he does not cooperate with currently Professor X, Magneto, and Nick Fury are in a state of mutual restraint. Professor Nick Fury and Magneto once again put Professor It's just that currently Professor this state of 3-party restraint cannot continue forever. Once one party finds an opportunity and becomes strong enough to easily deal with the other 2 parties, the balance will inevitably be broken. And if a 4th or 5th party intervenes, the balance will also be broken. But for Hawking, it's already very good. As long as the 3 parties can maintain it for a few years and allow him to improve his strength, it doesn't matter. Now everyone thinks he is a mutant powerful enough to fight Captain Marvel. But in fact, only he knows that if it weren't for a full moon night, if he didn't load the protagonist template for that hour, he would just be a scumbag who could be dealt with a pistol. It looks great. After getting off the car, Hawking looked at the high-end French restaurant in front of him and couldn't help but lick his lips. It's rare to be able to kill a big player, so he's going to be very full today. The food in the mutant canteen is indeed good. But how can it compare with this high-end restaurant? And because his appetite is too big, Chef Huge has changed the food he eats to a large volume type. You can feel full every time you eat it, but the taste is just average. Waiter, please give me 20 of these apple black blood sausages and fried sole. As soon as he sat down in the private room, Hawking quickly picked up the menu and ordered the meal from the waiter next to him. Opposite him, Nick Fury laughed and said, "Little Hawking, you don't have to order for us. Just order what you like." "Mr. Fury, these are what I ordered. I usually eat better. If you think I ordered too much, I can order less." Hawking immediately looked embarrassed. When Professor X, Magneto, and Mystique heard this, they all had weird smiles on their faces, but they didn't say anything. After spending 2 days with Hawking, they knew how good he was. Chapter 37 Panic Hydra. Ha ha ha, don't worry, You can eat as much as you want, even if you order 10 more portions, it doesn't matter. Nick Fury waved his hand when he heard this. Nowadays, S.H.I.E.L.D. is developing and expanding at a rapid speed, and there are too many places to spend money. The funds in his hands are currently relatively tight, but he does not have to save even on meals. Really? Mr. Fury, you are such a good person. The waiter just brought me 100 copies of those two things to start my appetite. A bright smile instantly appeared on Hawking's face. An hour later, Nick Fury couldn't help but twitch at the corner of his eye when he looked at Hawking, who had not slowed down at all. It's so edible. It's so edible. Even pigs can't eat it that well. This is a high-end French restaurant, which specializes in exquisite dishes with high prices and such an atmosphere. With Hawking's way of eating, he will really have to bleed a lot today. It's not that he can't afford the money, it's just that the money spent on this meal is enough to arm a team of elite agents. But he couldn't say anything yet. He was embarrassed at first, so he ordered 20 pieces of apple black blood sausage and fried sole. He opened his mouth and let the other person eat freely. Now that I think about it, I must have been fooled by this guy. There is no way, even if they know that Hawking's mental maturity is not that of an ordinary child, his childlike appearance still has a natural camouflage effect, which is difficult for people to be wary of. The most important thing is that he really didn't expect Hawking to be able to eat to this extent. Dee. Just when everyone focused their attention on Hawking, who was devouring food, the communicator on Nick Fury's waist suddenly rang. It's Hill. Seeing the call note, Nick Fury pressed the connect button. Just a moment later, his expression suddenly changed and he suddenly stood up from his seat. What? You said Colonel Stryker was poisoned. And his words also made everyone present look surprised. It's just the same surprise, but the object of surprise is different. Everyone else was surprised by Stryker's death, but Magneto and Mystique were surprised that Hawking actually completed this poisonous killing without leaving any trace. If they hadn't known in advance that Hawking was responsible, they would have never been able to associate Stryker's death with Hawking. However, the two of them were also old men. They were surprised, but they did not look towards Hawking to let the agents in front of them notice anything strange. Sorry, I still have something to deal with, so I'm going back first. I'll let Coulson pay after I finish eating. After communicating with a frown, Nick Fury turned off the communicator. According to Agent Hill's report, Stryker was suddenly poisoned and died suddenly while being interrogated by agents. Because when they received Stryker, they conducted a comprehensive examination of his body and ruled out the possibility of being poisoned in advance by Professor X, Magneto, and others. In addition, these people are still eating with him. Therefore, Hill suspected that one of the several S.H.I.E.L.D. agents who later came into contact with Stryker took the opportunity to poison Stryker. Not sure who they were, Hill arrested them all and interrogated them, but unexpectedly discovered that one of the agents who had just graduated from the S.H.I.E.L.D. Academy seemed to be a spy planted by a secret organization into S.H.I.E.L.D. Therefore, the current situation is more serious than Stryker's death. There is a problem within S.H.I.E.L.D. and he needs to go back and deal with it as soon as possible. It's okay. Director Fury and everyone else can go ahead and get busy if they have something to do. We can just settle the bill ourselves later, Professor X replied with a smile. To him, the money Hawking spent on eating was really nothing. There was no need to deceive Nick Fury, who had just established a good relationship with him, over this trivial matter. How can I make the guests pay? Coulson stays and the others follow me back to the headquarters. Nick Fury's face stiffened, and he did not agree to Professor X's proposal. As the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., he could not afford to lose that person. At the same time, he had to sigh that the Xavier family, which had been run for generations, was really rich. While Nick Fury led Captain Marvel and others to rush out of the restaurant, Alexander Pierce, the former director of S.H.I.E.L.D in the office of the Security Council Minister in the Tri-Wing building, also had a headache at this time. Sitwell, are you saying that Hill is interrogating a newly converted agent? Minister, this was an accident, but fortunately the agent didn't know that we were Hydra. We only did it because of money. Sitwell, a senior agent of S.H.I.E.L.D, quickly reported all the situations. As the main recruiter of Hydra, he organizes his subordinates every year to recruit and convert a group of suitable agents to join Hydra from among the agents who graduated from S.H.I.E.L.D. Academy. However, in order to maintain confidentiality, these most junior Hydra spies did not know that their organization was Hydra. The agent captured by Hill was one of his Hydras who had just been transformed this year. I just didn't expect that due to bad luck, being involved in Stryker's poisoning and murder incident and not being able to withstand the torture, this embarrassing situation would occur. Nick Fury is a very shrewd and cautious person. He quickly dealt with your man before he came back, cut off this line, and then turned the clues to some of the terrorist organizations we pretended to be. There is also a period during which all activities, including those targeting mutants, will be stopped. Pierce paced the office for a moment and then issued a rapid series of orders. He handed over the position of director of S.H.I.E.L.D to Nick Fury instead of his own Hydra members, mainly because he felt that Nick Fury was too good and capable. Although it is not Hydra, some of its ideas and behavior coincide with Hydra. This is also true. In just a few years, the scale of S.H.I.E.L.D has expanded several times compared to when it was in his hands. This also caused the Hydra that was parasitic within S.H.I.E.L.D to grow significantly. But at the same time, he must also be careful not to let Nick Fury discover the existence of Hydra. So now everything must be focused on appeasing Nick Fury, and other things can be left alone. At present, Nick Fury is the most valuable existence to them. It's just that this incident is really about people sitting at home and the pot coming from the sky. Why did he send people to kill Stryker? He was also waiting for Nick Fury to interrogate the mutant intelligence and experimental data from Stryker. Anyway, he can take a copy of whatever Nick Fury tortured out and give it to Hydra for research. It's a pity that he has to bear the blame if he doesn't want to, and he must not make the matter a big deal and let Nick Fury discover that there is a problem within S.H.I.E.L.D. It would be best to direct Stryker's death to those fictional terrorist organizations that are hostile to S.H.I.E.L.D. Even he is still confused now. Who poisoned Colonel Stryker? Hawking, who was busy cooking at this time, didn't know that he used the transformation spell to poison Stryker this time, and almost detonated the thunder of Hydra in advance. Chapter 38 I Want to Fight 10. What, Hawking? You said you won't go to class. How can this be done? Storm looked at Hawking with a serious expression. Professor X next to him also advised, "Little Hawking, power is not everything. We learn knowledge to enrich our brains well. You misunderstood. What I mean is that I have learned all the content in middle school. I don't need to learn it again. I just want to spend more time on how to control my abilities." Hearing that Professor X was there, Hawking quickly raised his hand and explained. After returning to school in the evening, he planned to start the Kamesun Ryu extreme training method and train his body hard. As soon as Neha arrived at the training room underground in the school, he was pulled over by Storm. It is said that the school will resume normal teaching tomorrow, and it is necessary to understand his previous learning progress and then determine which group of students he will be assigned to study with. Mutant School mainly teaches mutants how to adapt and develop their abilities, but it also teaches all subjects of other normal schools. It belongs to the kind of comprehensive development of morality, intelligence, body, and beauty. So people like Storm, Phoenix, and Cyclops are actually taken out one by one. Not counting mutant abilities, they are all characters with certain achievements in other aspects. Phoenix Girl has even published many papers on genetics and sociology, and once debated with congressmen at a government meeting on the mutant registration bill in New York. But he doesn't want to develop in that direction at all. Even if he becomes Iron Man, he can't defeat Thanos alone. Moreover, he has a very clear understanding of his own IQ. Instead of wasting time going to class with a bunch of brats, it's better to seize every minute and every second to become stronger. In this Marvel world where planets and universes are destroyed at every turn, only strong strength is the most important, and everything else is just a cloud. Have you learned all this? Professor Hawking just glanced at it and quickly gave the answer with a pen. He might not be able to solve 2 advanced mathematics problems, but he still has the mathematics knowledge in middle school and high school at his fingertips. Countless sets of test papers and countless exams have long been imprinted in his bones. The answer is correct and the speed of solving the problem is very fast, but did you omit some processes? Storm nodded, then added a few more steps to Hawking's answer. Hawking was stunned for a moment when he saw this. Isn't that just mental arithmetic? Then he suddenly thought that the basic mathematics taught abroad was similar to what he had learned, except that they did not seem to have the multiplication table or some test-taking skills. Mental arithmetic. It seems that you have a very good talent in mathematics, but this alone is not enough. Hearing that Hawking actually used mental arithmetic to simplify those steps, Beifeng's eyes lit up. Children of Hawking's age were not that good at mental arithmetic. So she continued to ask some more difficult questions. It's just that no matter what questions she asked, they were only in the scope of middle and high school, and they were not difficult for Hawking. He even felt that they were much simpler than the questions he took in the exam when he was in school. Just like that, an hour later, Storm and Professor X looked at Hawking and sighed together. Genius, definitely a genius. At only 12 years old, he can already easily solve most of the problems in middle and high school. This can definitely be called a genius. So, I don't have to go to class, right? Hawking spread his hands. This Professor X showed some hesitation when he heard this. When Hawking saw this, his tone became firmer. Professor, I know very well what I want. The outside world is not peaceful. I need to master my abilities early in order to better protect the school. Okay, but I still hope you can take some time to take music, art and other classes with everyone, and take it easy on yourself. Finally, Professor X compromised. Hawking is different from other children, and he cannot completely treat him as a child. It depends on the situation. Since there is no problem, I will go to training. After a perfunctory response, Hawking immediately rushed out of the office in a hurry. Hu-Chi had a meal during the day, and his body was filled with energy. Now he urgently needed training to convert the energy brought by these foods into his own strength. Scenario simulation, start. In the underground combat simulation training room, after Hawking entered a series of requirements, the scene in the entire training room immediately changed drastically. The originally smooth metal floor turned into a city street, and the 4 closed walls turned into high-rise buildings. Immediately afterwards, 5 strong men holding steel pipes walked out of those dark corners and surrounded him with stern expressions on their faces. Fake him! The 5 strong men roared and rushed towards Hawking with steel pipes in their hands. Hawking held an adamantium alloy long stick, gritted his teeth, shouted loudly and rushed forward, fighting with the 5 strong men. At the same time, he secretly sighed that the school's black technology was really amazing. There was almost no difference between the simulated gangsters and real people. Even the pain when the weapon hit him was so real. How do Saiyans improve their strength as quickly as possible? Of course it's a battle. The more intense the fierce battle, the better the effect. If it's the kind of battle that can bring you to the point of death, that's the best. After surviving, your strength will definitely increase significantly. With his current strength, he has only obtained Saiyan blood for more than 2 months. Not counting the protagonist's template, he is still stronger than ordinary people. If he really wants to engage in that kind of life-threatening battle, if he doesn't do well, he might really die. He definitely can't do that kind of mindless thing. Moreover, he has now established a super powerful persona for the outside world, such as S.H.I.E.L.D and Hydra. It cannot be justified if he goes out to fight and gets beaten up with a bruised nose and a swollen face. Fortunately, the school's combat simulation room perfectly solved this problem, allowing him to fight to his heart's content here. Even if he is beaten half to death here, if he goes to the medical room in charge of Phoenix Girl with those high-tech equipment and the Saiyan's resilience, there will be basically no problem. The premise is that you have to be tough on yourself. No way, who let him get Son Goku's Saiyan blood instead of Broly's Saiyan blood? Sun Wukong's combat power was only 2 when he was born, while Broly's combat power exceeded 10,000 when he was born. An hour later, Hawking, with a bruised nose, swollen face, and injuries all over his body, staggered to the medical room. Under Phoenix Girl's panicked eyes, he fainted and fell to the ground. Another hour later, under the stunned eyes of Phoenix Girl, the awakened Hawking jumped up from the medical bed, waved his hand as if nothing had happened, and left the medical room. This time, I'm going to fight 10. Chapter 39 Combat Power Increased. 3 years later, the same battle simulation room. After-image punch. Hawking left an after-image in place to avoid the shells fired at him, and then quickly circled behind a giant robot. Air bomb combo. A series of air bombs were fired from his hands, heading straight for the back of the giant robot's head, hitting it directly in the head. At this moment, another giant robot raised its fist as big as a millstone and hit Hawking hard. However, Hawking did not dodge when he saw this. He firmly blocked the punch with both hands, then grabbed the big fist and used force from his waist to perform a standard over-the-shoulder throw, which actually threw the giant robot away. Thoo-hoo! The last giant robot took off his right hand, and 4 tracking bombs burst out. Kyun slash. Gather energy with one hand to form a high-speed rotating disc. Then reach out and throw it out with force boom. Kai Yuan slash directly dismembered the 4 tracking bombs and split the giant robot's body into 2. Simulation over. With 3 giant robots killed, the entire battle simulation ends. Looking at the training room restored to its original state again, Hawking regretted. It seems that the intensity of the enemy that can be simulated in this combat simulation room is no longer able to meet my training requirements. He is now 15 years old. Because he can eat to his heart's content every day, fully replenishing all the nutrients his body needs, his height has also grown rapidly, and he has grown to 1.8 meters. At this time, his upper body was naked, revealing muscles as strong as steel. In the past 3 years, he has been training with various high-intensity weight-bearing turtle styles almost every morning. In the afternoon, he has come to the simulation room to fight with various enemies to develop his own potential. In the evening, he has practiced and studied Harry all kinds of magic in memory. Now, even without loading the Wukong template, his actual combat power has almost reached the level of 140. If the Wukong template is loaded, the combat power can instantly increase to 280 points. If he encountered the full moon transformation again, that would be 2,800 points. Even if it was Captain Marvel, he would be confident that he could defeat him instead of just holding him back like before. Similarly, in 3 years, he also absorbed all the magic in Harry Potter's memory, and was able to freely use various magics even without loading Harry's template. If the Harry template is loaded, the power of magic will be greatly increased when the bloodline is superimposed. But nowadays, it is difficult for ordinary training to achieve good results. Even if the difficulty of the battle simulation room is adjusted to the maximum, it can hardly pose any threat to him, let alone force out his potential like it was at the beginning. I hope Professor Hank can develop a gravity training room soon. The gravity training room is definitely a shortcut for him to improve his strength in the next stage. Unfortunately, Beast is usually busy with mutant affairs and does not have much time for research. In addition, the gravity training room is a large equipment that other mutant students except him cannot use at all. Maybe I should think about earning justice and making some money. Reaching out to pick up the shirt lying next to him, Hawking began to think about his next plan. In the past 3 years, except for taking Wanda and Pietro home during the holidays, he has not gone to New York City to fight criminals and earn justice points to unlock new protagonist templates. On the one hand, it is because his own physical strength is too weak, so he must first concentrate on improving his strength to ensure his own safety. On the other hand, the amount of justice required to unlock a new protagonist template is not a small amount. Before, saving the lives of all mutants on the Earth was considered to be full once. If it were to fight criminals on a regular basis, it would probably take a long time. In terms of cost performance, it is better to spend more time on the Saiyan bloodline that is in the period of rapid improvement, and the stronger the strength, the higher the efficiency of earning justice points will inevitably be. Now that the strength has begun to enter a period of peace, it is natural to consider going out to earn justice points to unlock new bloodlines and find ways to make some money. Money is important everywhere. He now has no shortage of food and clothing in the mutant school, but money also plays a very important role for him. The most obvious thing is that he now wants the gravity chamber to continue to improve his strength, but the beast doesn't have much time to help, and he can't force it. If he has enough money, he can find other scientists to help him build a gravity chamber to help his strength continue to improve. Hawking, are your training over? Just as Hawking was thinking, the door to the combat simulation training room suddenly opened and a familiar voice came into his ears. Turning around, I saw it was Storm with a hot figure, and behind him are Death Woman, Colossus, Iceman, Phantom Cat, and Rugrat. It just ended. What are you doing? Hawking saw the sudden appearance of several people, and his eyes showed doubts. It seemed that it was still class time. Storm smiled and explained, I'll bring Iceman, Phantom Cat, and Little Naughty for preliminary combat training. Graduation is about to happen. Hawking understood immediately upon hearing this. When students at the mutant school reach a certain age, they can choose to graduate and leave the school or stay in school and join the X-Men. Iceman, Fireman, Phantom Cat, and Rugrat are all 17 years old now, almost at the age of graduation. Obviously, they all chose the latter. In fact, when he first saw the Phantom Cat, he thought he was about the same age as him and 12 years old. In fact, he was just growing slowly and was already 15 at that time. Then you can use it. It just so happens that I won't be here for training recently. Is this rare? There was a hint of surprise on Storm's face. She knew that Hawking had spent most of the past 3 years fighting in the combat simulation training room. Because the highest difficulty level has no training effect on me. Hawking put on his shirt, turned around and left the training room. Nice body. Looking at Hawking's perfect figure hidden by his shirt, Death Girl, Storm, Phantom Cat, and Rugrat all secretly admired in their hearts. Not only men like to look at figures, but women also like to look at figures, especially Western women. Most of them like a strong and masculine figure. Hawking's well-tempered figure is exactly in line with the aesthetics of women here. Of course, for Phantom Cat and Little Naughty, in addition to admiring the figure, they are also very curious about Hawking. To them, Hawking is a legend in the school. Although he is only 15 years old, his deeds have always been circulated among the students. He saved the school when he first entered school 3 years ago, repelled the invading soldiers, and rescued many students. Later, he went on missions with the professors. He didn't have to go to class like them. Every day, he could be seen performing various horrific physical training throughout the school. For example, he jumped around the school while holding a barbell weighing over 1,000 kilograms, and swam in the school lake with big rocks hanging on his body. These actions seemed scary to the point of death. And his amazing appetite. If every mutant student is an outlier in an ordinary school, then Hawking is an outlier even among mutants. But don't mention it. Basically, more than half of the students in the school have some admiration for Hawking. The boys admired Hawking's powerful strength, while the girls were conquered by Hawking's perfect marble-like muscles that he exercised under the sun. Of course, sometimes it was not just girls who were conquered by the muscles. Others are simply grateful that Hawking saved them from those soldiers 3 years ago. Professor, is the strongest difficulty difficult? Iceman asked Storm after Hawking left. Storm spread her hands. It's not too difficult. With the addition of Professor Scott, Professor Logan, Professor Kin, and Peter, maybe we will have a chance of winning. Chapter 40: The Ring and the Magic Rod. After returning to his room and taking a shower, Hawking took out his computer and started watching the news. This is one of the things he does every day. Don't underestimate these news that ordinary people can see. Many reporters in this world are really risking their lives for some first-hand news, and they dare to get involved in any dangerous things. Sometimes, when something big happens, the news reports it before government agencies can react. Regularly watching the news will also help him understand the situation outside the school, and he can see the clues of some major events. Tony Stark, CEO of Stark Group, left in a car with 3 Hollywood actresses in the middle of a launch event to celebrate new products last night. As usual, the headlines are dominated by Playboy Tony Stark. It's a pity it was a few years early, otherwise I could have made a lot of money from Iron Man being kidnapped. Shaking his head regretfully, he clicked the mouse on the next page. During the time when Tony Stark was kidnapped, Stark Group's stock price plummeted. After Tony Stark came back, he announced the closure of the weapons production line, which caused the stock price to fall to the bottom. If you take the opportunity to buy in large quantities at that time, when Tony Stark becomes Iron Man and the stock price rebounds significantly, you will definitely make a lot of money. Unfortunately, it was only 2003, and there were still 6 or 7 years before Tony Stark, the Playboy, was kidnapped, and he couldn't wait that long. However, he considered whether he could also get in touch with it in advance. Technology products like the gravity chamber should be an area that Tony Stark is good at. Will Oroman fail to recover if it explores aerospace or seizes a large number of contracts from the AO industry? The title of the news on the second page immediately attracted Hawking's attention. Ayashi Industries, he seems to have some impression of this. Is it the Green Goblin's company? After carefully recalling it, in the Spider-Man movie, there seems to be a villain named Green Goblin, and his company seems to be called Oshi Industries. But for now, he didn't find any news reports about Spider-Man. This is the 838 universe, not the main universe he is familiar with, so currently he is not sure which Spider-Man it will be. You must know that although all universes have Spider-Man, the Spider-Man in every universe is not the same. There is the Tobey version of Spider-Man who can spray his own webs, as well as the Amazing Spider-Man, the Spider-Man of the main universe, Gwen Spider-Man, the Black Spider-Man, Spider-Pig, the British Spider-Man, Ava Spider-Man, and so on. The time points and even cities where Spider-Man comes from are not necessarily the same. If it were the little spider from the main world, it would probably be only 2 or 3 years old now. The Green Goblin seems to be a powerful scientist as well. His hang glider is pretty good. You might consider trying it out. Austin Industries mainly researches genes and military weapons. Although it is not as good as Stark Group, it is still considered one of the top large-scale military industrial enterprises. He continued to browse the news, and soon he saw another piece of valuable news. Dr. Reed Richards, a leader in many fields such as engineering, mathematics, and physics, is about to face bankruptcy. Can he survive it? Dr. Reed Richards, this seems to be Mr. Fantastic, right? Mr. Fantastic in the Fantastic Four has rubber-like abilities and is known as the smartest man on Earth. However, it seems that he has not been mutated by cosmic radiation. At least he hadn't heard anything about the Fantastic Four in the past 2 years. If you have time, you can focus on this one. After watching all the news and finding nothing valuable, Hawking closed the computer, picked up an ebony ring from the table next to him, and put it on the index finger of his right hand. Then he reached out and pointed to his head. The wind is swirling. A small whirlwind immediately appeared on top of his head and quickly dried his hair. Yes, that ebony ring is not an ordinary decoration, but something similar to a wand. After the beast returned to school, Hawking would load Harry's template and give the wand to the beast for study every day. After a full month, Beast was finally able to use the new machine he made to add wand-like properties to corresponding items to help Hawking perform magic stably. It's simply scientific enchantment. In addition to enchanting the adamantite long stick, Hawking also added an ebony ring. Apart from being used in battle, the adamantium alloy long stick is not convenient to carry with him at ordinary times, but the ring can be worn on his hand to assist him in casting magic at any time. As for why he chose ebony wood instead of hard metal, it was mainly to prevent Magneto. Even though he and Magneto seem to have a good relationship now, Magneto occasionally comes to X Academy to visit, so he thought that Magneto really won't cause trouble. In fact, he knew very well that Magneto was now accumulating strength and constantly looking for potential mutants to join his Brotherhood of Mutants, just like the Pyro in school who was deceived by Magneto into joining the Brotherhood. Once Magneto feels that he has the opportunity to destroy mankind, he will never be merciful. He could kill even Professor X when it was time to kill him, let alone him. Therefore, after that, even if he does not load the Harry template and does not have the magic wand, he can still cast magic smoothly with the magic stick and the magic ring. When I work harder and practice more in the future, when I can cast spells without a wand and silently, I won't have to do this anymore. It's almost time to eat. After drying his hair and checking the time, Hawking put on his coat, opened the door and walked towards the cafeteria. Although the students have not finished class yet, Mr. Huge in the cafeteria has probably prepared enough dinner for him. In order to prevent Mr. Huge from being overwhelmed, and also to avoid unnecessary trouble when eating with everyone, his breakfast starts before the students get up, and lunch and dinner happen to be during the students' last class. By the time everyone came to the cafeteria to eat, he had already finished eating and left early. So he also has a nickname among the mutant students at the school, called Mysterious Hawking. Even though they were in the same school, they found it difficult to meet Hawking. They could only vaguely see Hawking exercising outside through the window during class. It is precisely because of this sense of mystery that makes him more attractive in the eyes of students. It's not that Hawking is unsociable, it's just that his mental age is there. If you let him chat and become friends with those 11 or 12-year-old children, it is really a bit difficult for him. You see, he actually gets along very happily with teachers like Wolverine and Cyclops in his spare time. He occasionally borrows Cyclops's cool modified motorcycle to go for a ride outside. And indeed, in order to digest the strength brought by the Saiyan and Wizard bloodlines as much as possible, he really didn't have much time. Alright legends, that's it for today. If you're ready for the next chapter, smash that like button and flood the comments right now. Remember, we've got 3 days to prove this story needs to continue. Subscribe so you don't miss the drop, and I'll meet you in the next audiobook.